going? Welcome back to another incredible installment of the Arcane Archive. As always, we have an amazing topic today on MetaTalks. Sammy, go ahead and tell the people what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're going over kind of game balancing, a general topic.
D&D 50 5e game balancing.
Going over those pesky things that some people think are overpowered, and we might not agree on all of these, but I think it's something that's an interesting part to talk about. Is kind of a general thing. We're gonna go over item stuff. We might talk about some spells and some abilities that certain characters get, but it's going to be more of a general take on some things that maybe we have an issue with or maybe that we like, just in terms of balance.
Basically, like it's balance. The whole concept of balance is a pretty hot topic in like a TTRPG community overall, about like, what abilities might seem overpowered, what features are overpowered, what spells, items, everything that Sam just said. Like, it's like people have a bit of a feeling on like, what certain things break the game or make it unmanageable in a sense to structure certain encounters around. And yeah, we're going to go over that a bit. We're going to explain maybe like why certain items, abilities, or whatever, like why that comes across that way, like why a lot of people might feel that way. And then we might also explain a little bit how like either we disagree or maybe even certain ways we could propose that if you do feel like this particular thing is causing an imbalance, what ways maybe you can structure your campaign to bring it back into balance. Specifically speaking, like let's start off with a pretty fan favorite, like just ability, especially at lower levels. Essentially the ability to fly, right? In any D&D game, especially at lower levels and maybe even kind of at higher levels, there does become a very easy like feeling and discrepancy in balance when a character has the ability to fly. One of the like most infamous races that you can get are the Aarakocra, right? A lot of GMs either outright ban the race entirely or specifically are like, if you're going to be an Aarakocra, we gotta like lessen it, we gotta like restrict its ability to fly right away, because at lower levels when you're just starting out, like it'll just, the flight ability can give a very clear advantage in most combat encounters.
I mean,
what's your thoughts, Sammy?
My favorite thing, which I don't really agree with, but at both of my tables, what's always been, once we got our hands on more books, as we started playing more and we started making new characters because people were dying and things like that, there was always this, oh well, now I have like the Aarakocrans and the Feral Tiefling, both of which are winged and have a base flying speed 30, just like your walking speed. And it was this, well, can I have this character, like I can fly now? And it was always, depending on which DM I was playing with or who was at the table, it was this understanding of like, well, not till this level or not till this point, or yeah, you can have it fine. And it's one of those things where I think, in my opinion, I don't like, to me, when I play D&D, I don't have a problem with it. I don't care if people at the table play races that can fly. I don't care if your shitty magic item you pick happens to be one of the best in the game in the winged boots. It doesn't bother me. I can see where maybe as a DM or maybe at some tables it feels kind of power creepy, where it's like, well, I built my character and I took a themed item and look at all the stuff, look at all the work I put in to make this all work. And then the guy next to you is like, I fly and hit things real hard, and you just don't feel as effective. And that's something that like I used to really, really care about. I used to care about being the most effective when I first started playing, because my first character was very effective. And I didn't do it on purpose, but I was like, ooh, this
of course,
I like hitting big. I want to hit big numbers. That was my character.
I mean, it's a bit of an adrenaline rush kind of thing almost. You know what I mean? Where it's like
the way I look at it is like being effective at something and then being able to consistently get it done when you need to is a kind of like, some people don't care. They don't give a shit at all. They do not care. I
Some people
was
are just in it for the
not.
memes, man.
I
Some
was
people just
not
in it for
that
the
player.
memes.
I want to. If I want to be good at something, I'm going to build a character to be good at something. And so, you know what? Being able to fly on command without any resource management is huge.
It
It's
is. It's a power.
it's
There
very
is
nice.
there is no doubt, there is no argument that it is very powerful. It is a great powerful ability to literally just be able to, like you said, on command fly with zero to no, like little to no resource management or requirement.
Yeah,
Really.
I
And
think
like
you run into the problem where when you have a table that realizes how good flying is, and then all of a sudden, your next session where you have people roll new characters and it's a new game, and all of a sudden, oh, what's that?
they all
Five out of the six people
fly.
at my table can fly at level
Yeah.
3.
They all can fly. That is
So
interesting.
it,
Yes.
I think it's one of those nip it in the bud situations where if it gets out of hand is when you're like, all right, we need to have a talk. Because I can't balance encounters for you anymore.
Yeah. So well, I mean, so on that note specifically, like that is indeed the issue, right? The discrepancy where it's like balancing becomes difficult when you literally have to constantly plan and structure around a group of individuals, or maybe even at times just one individual that can fly specifically, like and even obviously in other ways of like, you know,
any high mobility,
because any high mobility, even teleportation, or even just a person who can move, 60 feet and around,
like people getting like they play a rogue or a monk and then they get hasted, and then
haste is its own thing. I love haste. Everybody loves haste. It's a great spell for many reasons. It's probably it is one of the best spells in the game, bar none. Like it just is. But specifically in regards to like flight, we'll focus on that one first. Like again, I absolutely understand where a lot of people come from in regards to, flight breaking can be a broken mechanic of the game, especially at lower levels. Because even in regards to, like, say on the other hand, like say a GM has a dragon fight, right? And technically speaking, if you utilize that dragon like correctly by a lot of people's estimations, like why would that dragon ever land? If it could just fly and blast you with its breath weapon, why would it ever do anything else? Why would you ever get closer to it? And so in that regard, it's also like, sure, that is a fair critique. That is a fair,
it's really hard to fight
estimation.
If you can't fly.
And it's like that's also what's okay. Then allowing maybe your players to get certain items or abilities that allow them to either fly or even more so, maybe you could even say the opposite. It'd be like having a situation where the dragon is compelled or for whatever reason incentivized to land or at least stay closer to the ground in order to allow like some of your martial classes to still have an opportunity to deal some damage, get in there and fight it and everything. Like that is still, there are ways that you can, I feel, in any situation, regardless of what ability, what item, what feature, what level, that you can structure the encounter specifically around your players to make it still challenging, but also fun. It doesn't have to be like, an absolute slaughter fest where it's like, oh, you are like deliberately maybe targeting one specific player or ability. Because I also know that that's what a lot of DMs like feel compelled to do at times, where it's like, if one character, especially if it's one character that outshines the others, like, okay, well now I gotta freaking plan around that one character and player and then deliberately focus and target them.
Well, I can give you a good example of this, and I think you'll appreciate this. This is my longtime, more serious DM. We recently, actually very recently, last time we played, which we're continuing tonight, we had a dragon fight. Nice. And a lot of our characters, we're not super great. Like, we're not super tanky. We don't have crazy amount of stuff. Currently? We're level 9, I think. Okay. But like we're really not we're not overpowered for that level at all. And the reality is he brings us this, we're fighting this black dragon, and it's always fun to fight. We're like, okay, and we strategize. We're like, we've already fought this thing once, it got away, don't get in a line, don't do this. And we still of course end up doing that. But my favorite thing that he does with dragons specifically, and this was more in the first time we fought him, is the dragon got close to us because dragons are egotistical,
Oh, absolutely.
aggressive.
They're egomaniacal, arrogant.
They had no idea who we were. We'd never met that. Like the first time we fought it 3 times in total. First time we
Ooh.
fought it, it was disguised as a hag, turned into a dragon, and nearly killed all of us.
Yeah.
And we just got enough licks in to where it was like, I'm not gonna get myself killed over these people.
No, dragons are also, especially like greens and blacks, are inherently cowardly too. Like if they're aware,
smart.
that's what I'm saying. They're intelligent, but they're also like, and maybe not even just greens and blacks.
They preserve themselves.
Yeah, all dragons are inherently, because they think of themselves so loftily and so arrogantly. They're like, why would I want to lose my life in this situation if I don't have?
Like I'm out.
That's
like,
stupid. I'm gone. Yeah,
I would say
I'm not gonna sit here and risk that.
I would say like white dragons are definitely more like primal in the sense that like
white dragons are the
tooth and nail.
dumbest. Yeah, white dragons are the dumbest as well as the most primal in terms of like they won't necessarily think maybe as strategically, depending on how old they are. If they're older, they probably will have a little bit more like, understanding and strategic placement. But
they're less likely to get out of there.
Apart from white dragon, and maybe also to be fair, even red dragons, if they get too angry, because they are the most like if they get angry, they lose all sense of reason and they'll just go wild. And so ironically, reds, who are the most powerful chromatic, and whites, who are the weakest, they're both the most likely ones to stay and fight just purely based off of either ego, rage, or just instinct. Not really think. Yeah, instinct. Whereas most other dragons will absolutely dip the hell out.
And so
if they're like, no, this is not worth it.
First time we fought this thing, like half of us went down. I mean, like it did not go well.
Yeah.
We got just enough damage on it to where it was like, fuck this, I gotta go because I don't want to die. I got plans.
Yeah.
So then we find him a second time, kind of like in travel, like in transit. It spots us and is like, oh, I'm gonna get them this time. And this time we were way better prepared and like nearly shot it out of the sky. And then it was like, oh god,
this is not.
And like he was like, nope, because we were like, oh, we can still hit. Like it flew, it came down, swooped, did a breath weapon attack. It only hit like 2 of us because we positioned ourselves well. Because our DM was like, all right, here's your traveling, thing. This is where you go. How do you position yourself?
Yeah, what is your marching
dragon
order?
coming?
Where
what do you
your
do?
Position? Yeah.
And so we're like, like
it's also pretty hard for a black dragon to like stealthily approach from the air.
We were in the middle of a field. Like
how old is it? Do you know?
It's older. It's not like the oldest, but
it's not ancient. It would be like adult then.
I think it's adult.
Okay.
I don't know exactly. He might be using ancient stats for it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because obviously, like,
because it's like a known dragon.
That also shows how big it is. Like, if it's like gargantuan size, then it's probably. I think it's ancient. I think adults are maybe huge. Adults might be at the lower end of gargantuan as well.
I don't know. Either way, it's the big size one. Either way, like it was one of those things of like, we know your thing is a line, so we're just gonna scatter.
And you're literally spraying just like acid. Like
it wasn't as effective. Like we used cover, we were plinking at it. It got just close enough to where our barbarian could hit it with was hitting it with javelins, which of course he also has a javelin of lightning, as you always do.
Yeah, you gotta give the barbarian his javelin of lightning.
And so like we kicked its ass. Yeah. Like to the point where it was like, I'm using cloud cover. I'm getting the fuck out of here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we tried to follow it. I cast fly myself and the barbarian, and we went after that guy.
Nice.
And it didn't work. We couldn't find him in the clouds because, he
can move way faster than you can in the air. Like it would be very difficult to like,
And so we couldn't find it. So finally we figure out, we think we know where its lair is. We've beat it twice. Like we can do this. And so we go in there, and it was like it dug out like to the perfect height in there, like it was waiting for us.
Oh yeah.
And we tried to position ourselves, and people were, and I've complained about this before, people were not being strategic. I was like, y'all, stop clumping with me, you're gonna get me fucking killed. And it was one of those things where like I was looking at people's health and like myself, and I'm like, dude, if he gets his breath weapon back and hits a couple, I'm dipping. I got no spells left because I got 2 fucking spell slots.
I was gonna say I actually have probably exactly a similar situation.
My thing with my DM is that what he does is that at the beginning of a lot of those encounters, he gave the melee fighters an opportunity to hit the dragon, like the first 2 times we fought, because he's like, well, the dragon is still like Oh, I can kill these guys.
Yeah, he's arrogant. He's underestimating you. Like,
and so like it was this mix of like he would be like, all right, what would I do here? And we're all looking at him, and he's like, nah, you brought up like 4 of y'all last time. Like he's going for you. Like, and it was one of those things like he's not being overly aggressive or like completely keeping the dragon safe.
sure,
But he's doing things like some things are logical, some things are more like you really piss this guy off because he will not leave him alone.
Absolutely.
So he is going to try to take you out real quick and then move on to the next person.
I would still say that's still logical
and to me, like the way he plays, like I appreciate how he plays dragons because he's not just sitting right out of our range, right exactly out of our range,
just waiting,
his breath
weapon.
No, he gets in there. I mean, like he's doing dive bombs. He uses the legendary actions not just to like get out of a bad situation, but also to let him
attack. Yeah, maneuver.
He's very smart with the dragons, and I think he likes running them. And I've had other friends run dragons where
he's a lover of dragons. Which is
I've had other friends who run them and they're just like, yeah, no, the dragon's 200 feet up. He's not coming down. I'm like, dude, then we're leaving.
Yeah, why would we fight that thing then? Like, if it's not gonna get anywhere near, like, but that's that they're in audience is a great aspect right there. I think that Sam just put forth. Like, if you really do love like a certain monster or enemy or whatever, you know what I mean? Like research how, like same thing for like beholders, for instance. That's another thing. Like research how they kind of behave and how they would act and how they might react to a party of adventurers who are able to do all this kind of stuff. I feel like that is also a great way to add balancing, right? Where it's like you don't have to play every single monster as if it's just like a brain dead, just run in there, fight to the bitter tooth and nail death kind of thing. For me in my games, anytime I run a game, absolutely, like anytime it's usually sentient creatures of some sort, I'm like, the moment they get to a certain health threshold, they are running. They are getting the hell out of there.
Especially if they're intellectual.
Well, they're logical.
If they're grunt soldiers, if there's like, you could throw a couple
I might even say they see like one of the party members deal buco damage to somebody, and they see like an explosion of just like, or disintegrate somebody. They're like, screw that! Like I'm gone. Like they're not gonna fight somebody who can
unless they really have a reason. Unless they're like forced in some way. Like again, we're talking about like some like a thieves guild kind of fight. You know what I mean? Where they're like, they're not gonna sit around and just be like, oh, we're gonna fight you to the death. Like screw that. They start losing guys. They're like, wait, did we not think this through?
It's bullshit. No, we weren't told this is what we signed up for. And it's like that's another way of being like,
But you tie that back in, and my favorite thing, I'm gonna use dragons here because it's a good example.
It is. Dragons are
pretty
overpowered in a lot of ways.
You have a dragon. Half the party you're dealing with, they can fly, and maybe they can fly quite fast. Whether it's from a flying mount or it's just inherent flying or magical flying. There is, if you knock someone prone, they fall 60 feet and around.
Yeah.
And there's that is a guaranteed 60 feet because they won't be able to recover until that round ends. They will fall and then they get to take their turn.
Yeah, no. They will instantly fall. And if they end up colliding with anything in that 60 feet, that's 66 of damage straight up right there.
So there are ways to mess with flying because if a player can incapacitate a dragon's flight, you can do the same to them.
I was going to say, let's circle back around specifically to like lower level play in terms of flight, right?
Oh yeah.
There are plenty of encounters and ways you can structure an encounter to specifically deal. Like again, while we did say that maybe it's not the best idea to constantly focus on like the one player or whatever that might have this particular overpowered ability, but for instance, if you have an Aarakocra, or if you have a character who took winged boots or boots of flight, whatever, like there are plenty of creatures and guys and enemies that have ranged attacks. And you can specifically give them ranged attacks that, like Sam just said, might end up knocking them out of the air. Like if you have like a dude throwing a javelin and it makes contact, if javelins are specifically strength-based, meaning that it's hitting with some heavy force. Like you could rule like, hey, if you get hit with this javelin, you're going to have to make either like a strength check or maybe like a dex or like a dexterity, or sorry, a strength save or a dex save to like either go with the force of the hit or to resist it enough to still stay aloft. Otherwise, you're gonna be falling down out of the sky. You know, there are little rules and maybe homebrew. Maybe I might have to homebrew some stuff. But there are, in my opinion, reasonable ways and applications you can put to use and being like, hey, this is how you can keep not only flight from being maybe overpowered, but even, like Sam said, use it as a potential downside or detriment to the player to be like, if they fall, that's some extra damage that
even if you want to go, even if you want to go completely raw, like you don't want to add rules. Say you try to do this and your players are like, well, that's not in the book. I don't like that. And you as a DM, you're like, all right, I can understand the frustration there. There is something to be said. Anything that gets rid of your speed, anything that like restraint will keep you from flying.
If you specifically need to like flap wings,
like, I would say winged boots and like just having flight. If it's not the flight spell.
Or like something that allows you to hover, for instance.
Yeah, if it's like levitation or the fly spell or like hover.
Or if it's
But if it's something that say gives
wings.
you like, so say Dragon Soul Sorcerer, it gives you dragon wings.
If you restrain them, you can't move. So what
are they gonna do? Like
you can fly, you can
fall. People underestimate the web spell. That's because there's also the fact of like, oh, they fly too much and they bug you. Make all your encounters in a 10-foot high room. There are like rules as written ways to mess with flight, even without adding things like, oh, well, you have to save for this, because the weakness of the spell fly is if the person themselves is casting it, anytime they get hit, they have to make a Constitution saving throw.
They have to make a concentration.
And if they're not the ones who cast it, odds are, unless the person is a higher level caster, there's someone in the back over there you can hit with things that if they fail their Constitution saving throw, that person drops out of the sky.
So you can also potentially dispel it if you have a spellcaster in the party. If they're up in the air, you just dispel magic and they fall. Like again,
I will make this point. I'm not saying make all your monsters able to do this, but say you have a couple people who can fly and they're fighting a group of enemies. Maybe one of your enemies has the ability to fuck with the flying. And if they as a team take out that person first and strategize, well, their reward is, I don't fuck with your flying right now. Like that to me is a good exchange, because that way you can play your monsters as like, well, we need that dude to stay alive. Because there's nothing in the book saying that you can't strategize as a DM. I'm not saying this is
not
what
I'm just saying. It's like you play, and again, I get it. There are plenty of monsters who have like an intelligence of like, 2 or 4. But I think we also did talk a little bit about that in a previous episode about like interpreting the number of an attribute as being maybe a little bit more or higher than you might think. Like I said, just because like an attribute is like 8 doesn't mean that person is like stupid or dilapidated or weak or whatever. It's like any creature, even if they have like, let's say, a 4 intelligence or whatever, it's like that creature is also a predator who has honed its ability to hunt and kill over who knows how many thousands, hundreds or thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
It is therefore not going to be just like some stupid, ignorant like beast necessarily who has no concept of kind of battle awareness. We spoke about that too. It's like, even if you might not be intelligent in a certain area, if this is where you specialize, and if you have battle intelligence and awareness, it is okay to utilize that as like, this makes the most sense. Most creatures don't want to be surrounded and ganged up on. They know that is inherently a bad position to be in. It's their danger sixth sense. So
it's like, dude, I don't want to like use choke points. I don't want to be surrounded by 4 dudes. I'm gonna step back into this hallway where only one of you can fight me at a time.
Absolutely.
Like, if they see some dude buzzing around killing people, of course they're gonna be like, we gotta take care of that guy.
Yeah, like, absolutely.
That guy's a problem.
Same thing for like, again, if you find if you have a party who is like really great at like, if they have, let's say, invisibility is another huge like people consider game breaking kind of thing or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, once more, if like you have like, say, a party is infiltrating a castle or some kind of enemy thing, they have invisibility and they get caught at some point for whatever reason, and there's like, but they only have like 2 guards, right? Have one guard be like, all right, we're gonna run away to get more reinforcements. Like, we're not gonna sit here and just fight these guys here like this, especially if it's like they might like initially draw their swords and say halt, but the moment like one of them takes like either a lot of damage, gets wrecked, or even dies, that other dude's like, screw this, I'm getting reinforcements.
Yeah.
Or you can even have one dude stay and like block the way while another guy immediately runs, and then that gives your party like, oh crap, we need to try and stop that dude quick.
I mean, that's the classic like kill in every strategy game, a lot of fantasy games. There's always like one enemy, sometimes in a group of enemies, that their one thing that they do is blow a horn.
Yeah,
they blow a horn. You know why? Because that horn
that
either is magic and summons more, or it's just a mundane signal of like help.
Issues. There's problems. We got problems in the area.
We need assistance. I mean, my favorite thing is, and this is something similar to the flying scenario of like your enemies can see this dude flying around. They will shoot at him. Even if it's like at a disadvantage because they're too far away. Like sometimes you can make the case of like, not that is the problem. There is something to be said about invisibility
behavior. I feel like honestly, and even more so, we can switch this also maybe to less of the GM's whole issue and more even a player thing, right?
Yeah.
Players, if you guys do indeed take these super cool items and abilities, you have these things.
Yeah.
I also would say that it is a certain etiquette or honor system that you also don't abuse them to an extent. Like Sam just said, it's like if you are literally a player who takes the boots of flying or the winged boots, don't be that jerk who literally is like, I'm gonna stay, like 50 feet or 60 feet, 65 feet away. Whereas like that's usually like, for spells, most effects, 60 feet is especially at lower levels, like the range or whatever that it begins to cut off. It's like, don't be that person who stays all the way back there up in the air where nothing and nobody can touch you if it's like a melee encounter of some sort.
My thing is like, if that's your play style, like if you chose, I'm a ranged character, I can fly, I want to be over there, I don't want anyone to hit me. That wouldn't bother me as a DM. I'll be like, that's smart, good job. But when I have a guy on my side, if I have two enemies who their thing is we sit back here and shoot at you, well, you best bet they're gonna target you. That was part of warfare. Is like we have people who fight in the front.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
People who shoot from far away.
If you're a ranger, you do that anyway, for sure.
Like if you have multiple characters who are sitting back there and they don't want to get in the fight, well, guess what? There are people that will close the distance. There are people that will shoot you down, and it's one of those things. Like this is something that comes up in my game a lot. On my Tuesday game, is my DM throws a lot of guys at us.
Oh yeah, a lot of guys. I usually am also like the type like that. If we're in an encounter, even if you start out maybe only fighting like 4 or 5 dudes, 4 or 5 dudes, there's nothing that says there aren't more that could be coming at this point too. Like as you're going, I usually do throw like kind of sort of waves at times at my players, depending.
I think when it makes sense, go for it.
Yeah,
like especially if monsters have ability to make more monsters or call on other monsters. And it's one of those things.
Or if you're in an area where there are multiple enemies in the area, in the territory,
there are ups and downs to playstyles. Being in the front and just having a high AC and kicking ass right in the front, you're gonna have people swing at you, but odds are you're gonna swing back harder. So there's this trade-off of like, well, if you're going to be out in the corner and you're plinking away at things are going to start plinking away at you or trying to get to you, and that's okay. I have some of my players in my Tuesday game, they get frustrated when it's like, well, my play style is to be back here. Why are there 3 dudes in front of me? And it's like, well, for the last 3 turns, they've been moving up towards you and you don't pay attention. Sorry,
you're a threat. That is an issue. It's like if they're moving towards you, you need to keep aware of your surroundings, and if you don't, then that is a strategic, loss. I mean,
that's the similar to the flight situation of like, there is a downside to this. There is also a downside to things like invisibility, where if you're using the normal invisibility, once you do anything, you're not invisible. If you're using greater invisibility, and someone else
lasts for a minute, and
it's only 10 rounds.
Yeah.
Right? 10 rounds.
Yeah, it lasts for a minute. Yeah. It's only.
So here's the deal. And this is I think some newer players don't realize this, and this goes both ways. I don't have to see you to shoot at you. All invisibility does is give me disadvantages on attack. And think about it this way, you're guarding someplace, and all of a sudden, the guy who's your partner at guard all of a sudden gets a wound in their side, and you don't see anyone who did that wound, and there's just now a hole in your friend, right? Out of pure instinct, both the guy who got stabbed, if he's not already dead, will swing in a way that, in like a flurry of like, oh God, get away from me.
No, it would be probably
because
like,
this is a magical world. People know that things are invisible. Both people and monsters have
that is another thing too, is like, you know,
they know that that's a possibility.
I was saying, yeah, GMs, like I've definitely had a number of games as well where GMs have played it where it's like, oh, even though there's magic and things in the world, it's like they have certain NPCs or characters like play dumb about certain things, and it's like, how would you know that that's happened? It's like, you know what? It's not an uncommon or an unknown occurrence. Or
mean, you could make a case that if a group of assassins who had the ability to turn themselves invisible, greater invisible somehow, whether it was with an item or whatever, went through a small farming town and systematically murdered people,
everybody,
there would be a case, I think, for these people to not know what to do. But if you're trying to take trained guardsmen, like, come on. Like,
I mean, even if
have some idea,
know that something was like, you can even just make, if you can't see something and something is attacking you, you're automatic. It's not like they wouldn't know they're invisible. That's a word. They'd run. That's a thing. They would run. They wouldn't necessarily know how to deal with them or how to counteract it. But like, they would. Their first thought would probably be, there is some kind of invisible threat right now. Whether it's a ghost, whether it's a spirit, a demon, a devil, they don't know. But something is clearly invisible and happening, and they wouldn't necessarily just die, you know, without doing swinging. Nothing. They would, you know, they would just be swinging. We see that in like other movies, other mediums, other things all the time, people like, where you're just like, you're just swinging around, because it's like, you don't want to necessarily die doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, in regards to invisibility, like you said, here's the thing: invisibility, the mechanics of it, how it works. Even if we're going to say like somebody has like a cloak of invisibility, right? Mm-hmm. That is a very powerful item. That is a legendary item. Like, that thing is busted in a lot of ways. It is, because you literally just pull however, one way is that I feel like one where you can work around it is it literally says, in order for you to have a cloak of invisibility, turn you invisible, you have to pull your hood up over, and it requires an action to do so. And that is what makes you invisible. Now, here's the thing. It is basically greater invisibility. Like, you are, and you have like invisibility, again, similar to like the winged boots, for like a number of hours. And it's unlikely that you'll ever use up that full allotment of time before you recharge back. But
it can happen.
It can, but it'd be it would be very difficult to do so unless you were like going through like a dungeon crawl kind of type of thing where they have little to no real resting time between. Yeah. But it's like, even so, even if you have that kind of thing, because a player of mine that I had when I was DMing, he had a cloak of invisibility. And it's very powerful. It's a lot of things. And it's like, but there are ways around it. For instance, if you have certain enemies or creatures, give them blind sight or tremor sense or whatever. Like, again, because I specifically had it too, where it was also part of his backstory that he was a part of kind of this like secret organization who specialized in study, like, they were basically a group of mad kind of wizards or other arcane practitioners who created creatures of like various types. Their goal is to basically create the perfect being, right? The perfect or organic specimen. And so that means that they usually like would take aspects, abilities, traits of certain creatures and splice them all into one. Therefore, I was like, you guys are fighting currently a creature that has the ability of blind sight from like either, from snakes or like from serpents or from bats or from whatever, whether it be echolocation, just enhanced like senses in terms of like smell, hearing, whatever else. It's like you can give creatures the ability to deliberately counteract certain enemy or certain players, especially if these players, as Sam said, they're infamous. If they've encountered these players before, if they know what they can do, there's nothing wrong with specifically giving them contingencies or counters to certain overpowered aspects. It's like, in terms of like what they can do, like another way too, if you don't want to do that, you can also say how you can also like put the argument, in my opinion, if the hood is up, who's to say that the hood can't fall back or be knocked back at some point too?
Oh yeah.
Like there's nothing that specifically says, oh, the hood is magically stuck in place as you pull it up. Like if they're moving, if they're like, who's to say that you can't grab and like pull the hood off of them to make them uninvisible again? Or once again, if they get hit in any kind of way, being like, hey, make a save or something, maybe to not have your hood get pulled back or knocked back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they get knocked prone or something. Like
I don't like this. I think I don't really like doing the whole make a save so your thing still works. Unless there's like
I feel like it's a similar thing to like concentration spells. If it's a continuous effect that's happening, then why can't you necessarily, similar to concentration spells, inflict a certain like requirement of a save in order to keep that effect constant, rather than it just being like, oh, this is just happening and there's no specific mechanic that says that this can be stopped in some way, except for like, again, so it's like, okay, let's treat it similar to a spell then. There are capacities, and maybe there aren't as many, but there are situations that you could, in my opinion, reasonably be like, hey, if this effect is still in place, like make a save to see if you can keep it going like this.
Yeah. My thing is like, especially if you're fighting people that you fought before, or people that like have some sort of dossier about you, whatever it may be, there's nothing stopping, like say you're invisible, you go up and you try to stab somebody, there's no reason why they couldn't in turn attempt to grab you. And if they grab you and you're invisible, if you're using the cloak and they know about it, they can use an action to pull that hood off. That's part of the item. Is it takes an action to put it up, takes an action to put it down, and hold people to stuff like that. But the reality is like, if you're fighting someone who knows what you can do, then they will attempt to counter it. And there's nothing like with invisibility specifically, like we have with fly, there are ways to mess with it. If you're invisible, they can still shoot at you or swing at you.
Oh, absolutely.
It's with disadvantage,
unless you're like actively hidden. That is the only instance where they wouldn't necessarily be able to actually attack you. Is if you are invisible, and I believe in the mechanic specifically for 5th edition, if at any point a creature is actively hidden and you do not have any sight or ability to perceive them in any way, that is the only instance where they are unable to attack you. The only caveat I say with that is if a person is invisible, even if they're not hidden, you can't make an attack opportunity against them because they're invisible, because you can't.
No, you can't make attack of opportunity.
That's the only thing there. But otherwise, unless they're hidden, you can still make active attacks against them. You're just at disadvantage. That's the only thing.
Yeah. The thing is like, you're also, just because you're invisible, like being invisible for the purpose of hiding, you're now heavily obscured. But if you move from location to location and you make any kind of noise,
you're making sound.
Like, they can shoot at you. They can swing at you.
If you smell really bad, for instance, like if you're like in a sewer, or if you had been in a sewer or something, you come out into like a warehouse, like you stink really bad, I would still be able to be like, yo, you are not completely like, again, they're still able to perceive you in some sense, whether they can hear you, whether maybe they can feel, like if you're like a big dude with like maybe a lot of like armor, if you're moving, you can create like tremors maybe on the ground where they can feel like,
well, even if you're like, dude, if you're wearing heavy armor, I don't care how invisible you are, I can hear you move. I can hear every time you step, every time you twist, every time you move your arm. That stuff is not quiet. Like if you're using leather armor, okay, yeah, you're right, it's really hard to hear you. But if you're wearing any kind of plate mail, any kind of chain mail, magical or not, unless it's muffled, unless you make an effort to craft some sort of set that doesn't make noise, they can hear you. And I will use that. And I expect, when I play in games, I expect my DMs to do stuff like that. Because to me, that is a counterplay. That's what D&D is about. It's a collaborative story. Expect counterplay to the things that you're good at. That's the whole point. The whole point of like being like, I want to be really good at stealth, I want to be really good at infiltrating things. Well, it's not supposed to be easy. So yes, you're really good at it, and like you'll get chances that no one else gets to because you're amazing at this thing. But it's not just a walk in the park for everyone.
It shouldn't be. And no. let's touch a little bit more upon that, as a matter of fact, because I do feel like that particular aspect is like in regards to, let's say, like what we call, I guess, finesse or expertise classes, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're and currently in 5th edition, I guess those two would be specifically like the rogue, the bard, and the ranger much more now, after they kind of revitalized and revised certain things about the ranger. Like those are the 3 like expertise classes where they get a lot of skills and they're usually really good at those skills. And
I mean, the rogue and bard more so. But
yeah,
Ranger,
that's what I'm saying. Ranger
is
now, as they've revised some things with the Ranger, and they've given them some optional things that have made them more in line to that.
Yeah, they're definitely a skill class,
which is good. Yeah, like which is good, because previously they were very like they could not compare at all to either of those 2 other classes, nor could they they were like almost a mix between every class, like overall, like in terms of like they were mixed like caster, a martial, and an expertise class. It was like all 3 of those in one for the ranger, and it just didn't do any of those things nearly as well as any of the others. And so it just effectively was like not anything. But again, they've made a lot of strides to fixing that, which has been great. I love that. Rangers are awesome. So in regards to that, like those classes will usually just be amazing at skill checks and things like that, right? Like effectively they cannot fail. It's another balancing aspect, right? That GMs can sometimes feel aggravated and agitated by, because it's just like, oh, they're gonna go up like, yeah, like with the bard, for instance. It's like bards, and a lot of time there are players that can be this way and be very toxic in the sense of like, well, I'm a bard, so can't I just basically force anybody to do anything I want them to do with my persuasion? I can't fail. I can do like a 30 persuasion check on average. So why would anybody not believe me? Or a deception check. Everybody would just believe anything I tell them all the time. And it's like, okay, once again, there is a certain amount of like honor system / etiquette that you as a player should do your best to keep in mind. Like, yes, it's super fun to be powerful. It's super fun to be great at what you want to be great at. But you also shouldn't be an asshole who abuses certain aspects and mechanics of the game, especially to the point where you start becoming toxic or you start thinking that you can just do whatever you want, right? Just because, like, once again, I think we talked about this in a previous episode, that the BBEG, I don't care how persuasive or deceptive or charismatic you are, you're not going to be able to just simply, even with a roll of a 30 plus, convince the BBEG to just stop what they're doing because you want to be friends or what. I don't care. Like, it's like, again, maybe you can, like, you might be able to, like, you know, affect them to a certain extent and be like, you know, you make good points, you make whatever, but that doesn't mean that they're going to automatically just stop what they're doing. They're not going to go completely and entirely against everything they believe in just because you rolled a 30 on the die. Like, that's not.
Well, we touched on that in the charisma part of our abilities video, which,
yeah.
And like, I think, you know, the same thing goes for abilities like stealth, sleight of hand.
There are ways.
Lock picking.
And there are fair limitations to the exact extent of which these skills, and while, don't get me wrong, I am a huge advocate for, like, you are superhuman, right? So good. I love to make my party, my players, and as a player, I love to feel you are a classed creature character in this world, right? That automatically means you are exceedingly special. You are already leagues and above beyond, in my opinion, what most people would be. And so therefore you are, in essence, superhuman. I'm also an advocate for, like, you know, a lot of people talk about the imbalance between casters and martial classes. My I guess fix for that, or solution to that, is make your martial classes more superhuman in terms of, like, they can jump and do incredible feats of physical prowess and ability that is akin to being able to, like, you know, rewrite the fabric of reality with magic. But
there's limitations to all of those things.
Even then, exactly. Even then, there are limitations still. Even, like, for instance, we can reference the movie The Matrix, right? In that movie, all of the awakened humans and the people who got unplugged and came back, they are clearly superhuman. Like, they can jump across vast distances of buildings. They can move at super speeds. But the so-called agents in the program are even faster than them, right? They are superhuman, super strong. They are not, no one has ever really been able to fight an agent in the first movie ever, except for when Neo appears. And even Neo, who is the one, who was like the most, seemingly the most powerful entity in the Matrix, even he has certain limitations. And the whole point of the movie is, as he grows and expands, he does his best to unshackle himself from those limitations, which I feel like is very similar to D&D, where your players are very similar to Neo. They are superhuman, and as they level up and gain more experience, they are learning new ways to unshackle themselves from the certain restrictions and rules of the world around them. But they still are. Neo isn't invincible. He's not immortal. He's exceedingly powerful, but not even he can like handle and fight, thousands of agents all fighting him at once. Even he is not able to fight like an individual who was necessarily on the same level of power as he is without incurring tons of damage, right? Even as amazing and incredible as he was. So similar thing here. And one thing I do want to touch upon with balancing in terms of like character abilities and stuff, GMs, on the other hand, while players, you absolutely need to be more aware and conscious of your abilities and not abuse them. At the same token, GMs, you shouldn't also just arbitrarily be like, no, you can't do that. Like, no, if a player rolls a high check and this is what their character does, then you need to let them be able to experience it. You can't just basically be like, they rolled a high check and, well, you're like, well, that doesn't really fit my narrative or my idea of what I want to happen or where I want to go. So that just doesn't have any effect at all. Like, you can't just completely disregard and dismiss their check. Like, while again, you absolutely shouldn't just let it, sway and completely throw what is derail your narrative and whatever. Nor also should you just simply disregard it as being like, this is completely ineffective. It does nothing, because that's shitty too. And it's like this is like, again, for a rogue, like for me, and since I've had a number of these situations as like an expertise class or a finesse class, where I'm like, as a rogue, when you get to a certain level, like, it's just almost impossible to fail any kind of like skill check, right? If you get reliable talent, which literally is an ability that is like, you can't roll below a 10 if you use your proficiency bonus for this skill. You just can't. Doesn't matter what you roll. Even if you roll a 1, which might arguably be like, but even then, technically
to me, if it says I can't roll lower,
to me, like, technically speaking, it's like, it specifically says you treat any roll of a die as 10 or any roll below or 9 or below as a 10. That's what it says. And so, but again, obviously, if you wanted to have certain flavor and still be like, natural ones, and I know a lot of people have that homebrew, because to be fair, technically speaking, and just rules as written, natural ones are not automatic fails or successes on anything. No, not natural ones, natural 20s are not automatic fails or successes on anything, except for attack rolls. That is it. Those are the only things. And even maybe natural ones might not be an auto fail on an attack roll.
Natural one isn't really in the books, but it's like it's kind of a communal rule.
Yeah, it's always been a communal rule where it's like, again, a natural 20 is the thing where if you, on an attack roll, if you roll a 20, you automatically crit you automatically hit and you crit. Like, that is the case. And so a lot of people are like, well, if you do a 20, if you can do the best you can possibly do, then a 1 should be, whatever. Which is like, and that's fair. I like that rule too. I find that it is fair. It's like, if you can get this extra bonus thing for rolling a natural 20, then why shouldn't you maybe get an extra bonus negative thing for a natural 1? I find that fine and fair, as long as within reason. But that being the case, I know that a lot of GMs feel that way about like classes that have this thing where it's like, both bards and rogues, it's like, oh, you can just add your proficiency bonus, or you can't roll below a certain number with jack of all trades or reliable talent, and they will just they will not fail a check.
They're good at rolling. That's what their classes are meant
let them be. Let them have an effect. Let it like I said, you don't have to be like, oh, they rolled a 30, so you have to change your BBEG's entire personality and goals and objectives. But let it affect them. Let it affect your BBEG and be like, I do understand where you're coming from. I can't necessarily refute what you're saying to me, But that doesn't change the fact that we have come to this point now, and we still need to follow through with what's happening.
Well,
I've come too far to back out now. So either kill me or get out of my way. Like, you don't have, like, again, let it affect and have an effect on the current situation. But you don't have to just be like, well, they just get everything that they want because they rolled really high. That's
well, yeah. Well, it's one of those things. Is like my current rogue. It's like I roll like 32s, 33 on my stealth all the time.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing my DM does is like, all right, well, Tyr is, you don't know where he is. He's like, none of you can see him.
Yeah.
So he's gone.
He stealths out of the campaign. It's hilarious.
I'm gone. I rolled a 35. Like, he's just not here right now. He'll let you know when he needs.
And just a quick aside to that, for stealth, even if you roll a 30, you still have to be stealth in some way. You have to have something that breaks line of sight or sense or whatever, like we were talking about with invisibility. Sorry.
And so it's like, you know, we're in an underground fucking thief city in Skullport, which is in like Faerun, all that stuff. And it's like, Tyr's gone because it's dark here, and he wears all black armor. Yeah. And you do not know where he is.
He does that cool thing where he just like absorbs back into the dark.
I just step backwards. Yeah. And I'm gone down the alley, and you don't know where I am.
You're a literal ninja.
And it's the funny thing of like, I did that because we were trying to scout an area, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to be seen. You guys can be seen. I'll just use you guys as bait. So I step up, I get up on a roof, and you know, as I'm moving around, there's like different enemies and things. So he's having me re-roll because he's like, well, I need to make, like, I want you to contest. Yeah. Because you're good at what you do, but I want you to roll. And some people will be like, well, the rule is roll every 20 minutes of activity. My DM, it kind of changes based on what you're doing and if you have direct contact with people, which is fine. I don't care. I would do it differently. I don't mind it. But he's having me roll, and I'm consistent, like 31, 35, 32, 30, 31. And so I'm zipping around rooftops and stuff like that, and then there's this like old man standing on the roof, and I'm like, oh, and he's like, yeah, you're chilling behind some boxes on a roof, and you peek out at the old man, and he's staring at you, and I'm like, I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? And the dude, like, it's one of his abilities is like he can see through shadow, like he that's his thing. He's like this mythical creature that, like, we knew his name, but we didn't know, like, they were the same.
He's got like devil sight or whatever.
He was this like magical dragon, like assassin he was well known in this city as like someone who was trying to take over. Yeah, like he had his own faction. This dude was powerful.
He's a BBEG. He's
and so like of that area, and so like I looked at him and he's staring at me, and I'm like, oh god damn it. Yeah, and it's one of those things. Like, once I like, at first I was a little salty. I was like, wait, how does he see me?
Yeah.
And then
I can see that.
And I asked him, and he's like, I'm like, how does he see me? He's like, roll a perception check. I'm like, okay, and I'm good at perception checks, so I rolled. I was like 26, and he's like, okay. He's like, you peek out again to look at him. And you watch, you can see like there's something going on with his eyes, and like his clothes don't seem to be fitting him correctly. Like there's like a shimmer about it. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, the guy starts walking towards you, and I'm like, well, I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah,
like,
I'm dipping.
And as he's walking towards me, one of the other players like says something to him or sees him or whatever, and of course it's our barbarian. So he's like, what's up? Like, and the dude goes from being like what looks like an old man in like a duster coat, and all of a sudden like shadows start leaking out of his coat, and like these like skeletal wings come out, and I'm like, oh geez. And I'm like, as soon as I knew, I'm like, all right. I get it.
It's again,
I'm not invisible. Like, no, I don't have any cloaking magic. This character is relying on his physical talent. There are limits to that.
Well, it's environmental and physical, and he's literally relying on his skills. Which, again, there are limits, as we just said. There are limits to what your skills can accomplish for you. It doesn't mean that they're like, you know, super low or like whatever. Because again, I'll go again a brief aside based on something Sam said before as well. In terms of like, I also feel like in regards, I think a lot of gyms do have a similar maybe tendency to be like, if you have an expertise class or a class that's a skill monkey class, to be like, well, re-roll in order to like see if they fail. Which I feel like at the same time, we talked a little bit about this in the inverse, when it's like, oh, a party fails a check, and then they just get to keep rolling it over and over again until they succeed. That's not fun. It's also not fun to have to keep re-rolling to see if you fail a check that your GM wants you to fail. That's not a good way to counteract that. It's not in my opinion anyway, it's not a fun way to be like, they roll a high number and basically be like, oh, well, you know, it's been like a couple of seconds or whatever. Like, again, if you roll like a natural 20 on stealth and you get like a 36, you have that until you do something that breaks your stealth, as far as I'm concerned. You don't have to roll another check at that point.
And that's like, I would say, you know, there's a balance there. I think in that specific instance, I understood his train of thought of like, well, you can't always stay hidden. So part of this is like, well, now you have to blend into a crowd to get to the next alley. Reroll. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll give it to you. That makes sense to me. I mean, if you would have me roll every 6 seconds, I was like, no. But
that makes sense to me. But at the same time, I still feel like your previous role would still transfer to that and basically be like, that is how skillful you are. The fact that you can just blend into a crowd seamlessly. But I do like the fact, once more, because I get it. Like I said, expertise, like prestige classes, like expertise classes like this, like, yeah, it can get difficult to be like, all right, the rogue is just gone. You know, it's just like, you're like, how do you justify being able to see the rogue before they're able to, if they roll like a 30 plus or whatever. But again, I also like what he did in terms of like, there are just reasons. Yeah,
it wasn't just random.
Yeah, there are just some creatures and people who are like, hey, they will see you. Like, they are strong enough to potentially see you. Now, again, I still feel like maybe not all the time, because to be fair, rogue also is specifically structured and created in this way. This is like, once again, the only thing that they're really good at. Like, they don't get they don't get multi-attack at any point. Nope. They just get sneak attack. They get cunning action, which allows them to potentially stealth, disengage, or dash as a bonus action. But that is also, again, in ways like being able to stealth successfully is one of the bread and butter of the rogue, because that is also something that can help most rogues who don't just get an ability or a way to get their sneak attack by themselves. That is something that can do that. You know what I mean? It's like, and so being able to allow them to do that and for that to take effect, I think is paramount to, if you're going to allow a rogue, you need to allow them to be able to have their skills apply and have an effect, and not just simply wave them off arbitrarily.
It's the same thing as
there's a reason.
It's the same thing as the bard, where they're a charisma based class, and odds are they have a lot of magic. Well, but like, they're a charisma based class. The same way the rogue uses stealth and dexterity is the same way, in my opinion, a bard uses their charisma.
Absolutely.
And like, there is, if you're very charismatic and your player plays it at least to an acceptable point, there is no reason, unless the player is acting, you know, brash and mean and not interacting with people around him, there is no reason why any given bard wouldn't have a posse at any bar he's at. Any tavern, anywhere he plays music, here, like, they attract other people because of their will, their charisma. And so, like, my favorite thing to do is to talk to people as a bard, and like, and that's kind of what you're see what I can get away with. And it's one of those things of like, that I want to see how many bars I can go to without paying for a drink. You know, like stuff like that, where like,
well, that's not even game breaking.
No,
right?
a DM might not be ready for that though. And I'd say to players is like, you know, play with it, see what you can get away with, but also understand that there's limitations. Some people are just like, you can be the most charismatic person, someone in the room is going to hate you. Whether it's because they have their own vendetta against people like you, whether it's specifically because of something you did, no matter how charismatic, no matter
prejudice, they could just be like, oh, I hate people like you. Yeah, they could be that. They could be.
It's one of those things. Like, think about it in real life, right?
Exactly.
You look at like trained military operatives. You could be trained to do the craziest shit. You could be stealthy. You could step as quiet as a pin hitting the floor, but depending on an angle, someone's going to see you if you're not careful. You could be the most charismatic.
I mean, there's
you
no
can talk up a whole crowd.
You know what I mean?
There is never 100%. And so, like, yes, use them. It's not going to work all the time. And that's the same thing.
And
with those
don't
expect who have magic.
It to. You know, and that's the biggest thing about again, for players, right? I know a lot of people in real life, especially, like, you know, people love to have that assurance, right? Mm-hmm. People are always constantly fiending and salivating and trying to get that 100% guarantee, just assurance on like, this will always work. And the point of life, real life, as well as even D&D that tries to mirror life to a certain extent is nothing is ever 100%. That's the point of rolling dice. That's the point of having mechanics. It's about having at least some, and to be fair, again, with these classes, the point is that you have far less likely a chance of failing. That is the point of these classes. That is the point of a lot of their abilities. And that should indeed be the case, right? You are skillful. You are a skill monkey expertise class. You are supposed to do things where it is highly unlikely that you will ever fail. Doesn't mean everything, of course. Again, specifically for like reliable talent for the rogue, specifically stipulates that you have to have your proficiency bonus applied in some way for this effect to take place. So you're not going to be good at everything, and that's okay. But the things that you are really good at and that you are able to apply in basically almost any situation, whether it be, your stealth, which you can apply both in and out of combat, that directly ties to some other, your most powerful mechanic, which is probably, your sneak attack, as well to like rogue or bards with their jack of all trades, where they get basically like half the proficiency bonus to everything at least. You will almost always succeed, at least if depending on a GM, of course, in the situation, right? I'm sorry, excuse me. That also depends on how high the GM sets certain like DCs for your accomplishments. And GMs, you guys also should just don't set exceedingly high DCs specifically for the skill monkey class, just to fit your narrative. In my opinion, and I think Sam might agree, the best D&D games and campaigns are run by GMs who have the ability to some extent roll with the punches and be flexible, but also when it really matters and counts, be steadfast in how certain things should go. You got to be flexible. You got to be willing to roll with certain mechanics. That's the point of free will. It's the point of the game. It's the point of your players and characters, right? But at the same time, you also can't be just so loosey-goosey that you just allow very, foundational or specific pillars of your narrative, of your story, of whatever, to just be toppled over by a mere roll of the dice.
Yeah. It's like when you put things like traps and things like that. For example, say a door is trapped. This is gonna be this is kind of a catch-all.
Yes.
A door is trapped. There's two ways to figure out if it's trapped. There's a skill way and a magical way.
Mm-hmm.
One of those might fail. You give them the other option in a sense. Like maybe like the rogue tries and it like you're like, oh, you try and you just can't seem to open it or figure it out if it's trapped. Like it just, you don't know. And then the wizard comes in and he's like, well, no, I got a spell for that. And that works. It's like, okay, well now you gave two different pillars of like two different versions of the same ending. Mm-hmm. Is like, I have two different ways of trying this. Say they both fail. And someone comes up with, well, I want to try this. And you didn't think about it at first, but you can't in your head think, well, why shouldn't they be able to at least try that? It might be harder. It might take longer. There might be some sort of negative there. But I'll let them try. Because if you don't, that pathway is gone. And we talked about this before. You have to, the pathway's there. There might be a detour. There might be another way somewhere else. But you can't, it's not overpowered that they can figure out a way to get through your stuff.
It's not overpowered that they can solve your puzzle, and it with game mechanics.
And it might not be the way you wanted them to.
No,
but that's okay.
But that's all right. It doesn't always have to be the exact way you want. That is the point of the game. That's the point of having dice. That otherwise, just write a novel, write a book, and everything will go exactly the way you want it to anyway. The point is the uncertainty or the potential variables that can occur naturally and organically from you guys playing and interacting, from people having certain ideas. It's like if they have an idea that is hell for me, I'm like, if I have a certain idea of how maybe I expect this or want this to go, but a player comes up with an idea that was like maybe even better or more interesting than what I initially came up with, that wasn't actually the way they were supposed to solve or handle the encounter. But I'm like, whoa, that is, I've never even thought of that. That's great. Yeah, let's go with that. Do that. Because that's amazing. Because it also then makes your players feel like really smart and skillful and important. And like they get that moment to be like, I that's awesome. It's like, you don't have to shut it down to be like, oh well, that's not the way you're supposed to solve this, so no, you can't do that. Like that's not the way I envisioned it, so no, you can't do that.
There are certainly some aspects and some puzzles and things where you're like, well, if you don't figure it out, this way isn't really the way anymore. And like I get that. I get that, especially if it's like magical puzzles and things of that nature.
Well, that's the point of finding different ways, right?
Yeah, but like, there could be some other
force your way through everything. If you tried this avenue, it didn't work, then you can't keep doing it.
Regroup, come back. Like maybe this sorry, but this story
get it from a different angle. Use your imagination. You know, that absolutely.
My favorite thing, and this is something that I think a lot of players, and I was guilty of this myself when I first started playing. We had a puzzle for the life of us. We could not figure it out. And we started doing like random combinations of things. And it like, I could tell my DM was getting frustrated because he's like, guys, sit there, think about it for a second, and then we'll regroup. And it got to the point, and I think about it now, and I'm like, you know what? Well, there was a point where we should have left and gone for our next lead and tried something else.
I would say in that instance, the GM should also, like, if the GM notices that their party is you're not going to stop. You're not going to give up. You want to accomplish this, so like you're just stuck in it. Like at that point, the GM just start giving some hints.
No, he did. We just for some reason, whether it was because too many of us were a little.
I mean, did he have you guys start rolling like some more checks to be like roll like a history?
We exhausted. It was like nobody rolled well. We just couldn't figure it out, and it was one of those things where like eventually I think he caved.
I would say that,
and I honestly, as I am now, I think there was a case for us being like, you know what, wasn't meant to be. We'll find another thing, and we should have just left, and he would have made something like made another way for us to do it. But because to me, it was like that exhausted it, and he was like, even after he let us through, he was like not really in a good mood about it.
Well, that's
all
what
of
I'm saying.
us were like, we were all frustrated.
At that point, it is the GM's responsibility as being the one who's keeping, he's keeping purview, he's keeping away. Like your job as a GM is to, whatever the encounter, whatever the obstacle, you're trying to keep the game fun and interesting and whatever for the people and the players. Okay. If you are now seeing that frustration is beginning to set in to such an extent where you're like, okay, you know what? Just give it to him at that point. Once again, is this particular moment that important to keep your players in there, like to the point where they're now like completely they're starting to become disengaged, they're starting to become like frustrated and just disillusioned, and they're just like, in my opinion, almost nothing is worth that moment where your players start beginning to decline, your game starts to begin to decline in that area. It's like just give it to them. All right. Whatever like outcome or whatever payoff you're looking to get from this particular isn't worth your players beginning to literally become disengaged and losing, their enthusiasm.
I think for me at the time, even when he gave it to us, we were just like, we were frustrated. We're like, why didn't this work? Like we felt bad. He felt bad. And it was one of those things I think would benefited from him being like, hey guys, like you couldn't solve it, but like this might not be the only way forward, so maybe regroup and try something different. And it was one of those things, if he gave it to us, I think, and it didn't feel right for us too, because the person we were going after was like super smart and super like, this makes sense. We were all sitting here looking at this like, we understand why this is here and why it's difficult, but we were just
can't figure it out.
We couldn't do it. And like I remember a couple months later, we asked him, like we'd finished the campaign, we asked him about the puzzle. And he showed us, he made it up himself from scratch, and he was a mathematician. Like he's a math teacher. And so he showed us the puzzle. He showed like the different ways you could solve it. And we were all sitting there staring at him like, dude.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's ingenious. And like we could have gotten there, but it was just not the night to do it. And it was one of those things of happens. I'm like, that's on us, honestly. And I'm like, you shouldn't have. And I told him, I was like, dude, you shouldn't have let us go through there. You should have made something up. Like we would have, if we had detoured and gone some other way and figured some other time to do this, it would have gone better. And I think
I feel like in any situation, when you get into that mindset, almost anything would have felt like a cop out or would have felt like unsatisfying.
If he had left it there, like as a thing of like, you can come back to this, I wouldn't have felt like it was given to us, and it was one of those things of like, it's one of those learning moments of like,
I don't know.
Maybe look at the people you're playing with.
I agree. I feel like it's important to know who you're playing with, and again, obviously structured around your players. But at the same time, like for me, for instance, if I get into that space and I'm having this thing or whatever, like a lot of the time I'm like, again, basically saying like, you guys can come back later. It's like, I don't necessarily want to come back here. Like I don't want to like I have a distasteful like memory and aspect. I don't want to fucking do this again if we don't need to. Like this was already annoying enough. Like I'm like, I would rather just get past it and actually get to the actual thing we came here for, you know?
So there is some aspect, Adam, that I think is kind of a meet us in the middle scenario for that. And that's like, if you give them options to roll, to maybe find information, they fail, right? And you just can't get through it. Like there's for some reason, well, make it your new goal. Go find information about this. Where could you find information? Maybe there's some sort of secret key you don't know about. And now your group of adventurers is trying to find some sort of archive or something. And that could be in a city where you have to gain access by being a member or being smart enough. Or it could be a combat encounter, some ancient ruin that you've never been to. And there's always another way to give them an opportunity to find an old tome with a key, to find an old, and so for me, it's something I learned is like there is always another way, and sometimes to back away from a problem and regroup, because we do that as people in the real world. We do that. There is no reason your made up character doesn't have that same kind of like, we need to just stop.
No. Absolutely.
And I think it can be satisfying. Give them another avenue, and maybe
like, here's what I'll say to that. Like in my opinion, like that's the thing for me. I feel like that might have the potential, and I've been in a number of campaigns like this as well, where it's just like, I don't want to have to constantly have another freaking side quest.
I'm not saying do it all the time.
So like, yeah, it's like, again, like I said,
this is not an all the time thing.
That mentality, like I said, again, I agree at times, and maybe it can be good to like have that where it's like, hey, you know kind of where you need to go, but these are the steps that you need to take to get there, which is great. It's great. The only issue with that being is I feel like it can be, so long as it's not overused, where it's just like, my point being is like, we want to get to that point, right? We don't like, and again, obviously that I suppose this would technically be the logical mark of a great storyteller, is having that balance of, build up, side quest, and then that payoff. Because if you're stuck doing this thing and you're like, all right, we can't even get past this one particular obstacle that we know is the way that we have to get to through this obstacle to then get closer to our overall goal. Oh, but now we have to take a detour to find a way to get information to then get through this obstacle to then take us to the final overall payoff. It's like, that's too much. It's like, if this is already a preliminary step that we're taking to get to the final thing that we're trying to get to, don't send us off on another goose chase to then get the thing we need, to then get through this preliminary step, to then get to the final and it's like, that's just, it becomes too much. It becomes too convoluted. In my opinion, that takes me out of it. And it becomes just, it's like, we want that payoff. We want that. And that, honestly, I feel like might be a great segue to go into another aspect of balancing, one of the biggest aspects of balancing maybe in the game, if not the biggest, character levels. Your character level in terms of like, obviously you have to do different leveling up ways, which is milestone and XP. Yeah. And kind of what we're talking about right now, what I say is a good segue, is milestone level ups. Milestone level ups are, and there's obviously a huge debate between, XP versus milestone, and then in regards to milestone, what counts as a milestone for your character to actually level up, and at what point does your level ups start beginning to unbalance the game in terms of your level and how powerful you are. And for me, I'm a GM. I prefer higher level play. I want, both as a player and a GM, I want to be able to have the ability to use all the cool stuff I see in my class. I don't want to be limited and have just this thing for like, potentially, I've met and played with people who've played. I think you have yourself. You've played years in a camp, multiple years, and you only get to like level 9 at the max. And it's just like, what is that? You're leveling up like a maximum of like what, every 4 to 6 months, like on average.
So, okay, wait. Let me cook. All right, so
go ahead.
So we played our first campaign for 2 years.
Uh,
I think it was about two and a half years we played, and we ended. I want to say, let me check real quick. I need to. I think we ended at like 16. No, 15.
Okay. That's not a
15
bad.
was our-
That's not a bad
15
level to end on.
We ended at 15. That was
How
our
many-
end all be all.
Do you know how many sessions that you had as like level 15 players?
Not many.
Yeah.
Well, no. We played for like a month or two.
Okay. How,
At 15?
like every week for that month, essentially?
most.
So like four sessions, basically?
I would say for 2.5 years, I played pretty much every week.
Nice. Okay.
Which is a blessing and a curse.
That's not sure, yeah, it can be.
Because it was
again, that's not bad. You know,
it was 3 times a month, sometimes it was 2 times a month, but for the most part, it was weekly. Now, we started at level 1. So level 1 to 15 in 2.5 years. Now, there's also the fact that we did have a full TPK.
Yeah.
Came back at that higher level.
Yeah, sure.
That our players were at, and continued from that point onward.
Sure.
Now, we played through 3 books. Because it was a module campaign. Okay. So we played through the entire Tyranny of Dragons series. So,
and were you guys using XP or Milestone?
Milestone, because that's what the books use. Milestone.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the reason I like Milestone is because of this one point, and that point is, as DM, now you would have more, I think, experience with this than I would. The most I've DM'd is like one shots and things for people.
Sure.
I don't really do. DMing is not me. I'm definitely more of a player, but
I don't know. You did pretty well for our short stint campaign.
Dude,
it was pretty fun.
I'm an off the cuff guy. I don't write.
Yeah.
And that gets me in holes of like not being able to do deep storytelling. But
you make up for the fact that you're pretty learned in terms of studious. Like you know a lot of the stuff, and so that's why you're able to probably use more off the cuff. I just don't have enough deep storytelling. It's one of those things, like that's my problem. I don't have an end all be all for a lot of my stories.
Sure. My reality is
that's maybe the point. You
sometimes
that
for some people they need
group.
that, and for some people they don't.
Yeah.
But my thing with Milestone is it gives both the players and the DM an opportunity to segment their leveling to go along with what they want the players to have to deal with, right? So you're in this grandiose story, and there's this big thing happening, but you start over here in this little small town, right? And as you get closer, whether it's through information given, whether it's through these new things you're dealing with, because maybe this big bad thing isn't even something in their head for the first 3 months you're playing.
It's not relevant to them.
Well, then they shouldn't be level 5 or 6 or 7, because they're not dealing with things that matter to that extent. So as you're getting, and this is just how I feel, and this is as a player as well, I like playing at level 4. It's fun. Stupid things happen. But as you get closer to this big grandiose thing, you have to give your players a fighting chance. Obviously, there's times, if you're a module player, if your DM only runs books, you're going to have problems in games like Tomb of Annihilation and Curse of Strahd. You can end up in a place that you should not be. And you do not just get to be a higher level just because you ended up there. But I think, in my opinion, as you get closer and closer to these big story arcs or these really important events, your DM has the opportunity to look at what they want to throw at you and look at what you're capable of and scale you to that, or scale themselves to you. And so for my DMs, they all use Milestone.
Yeah.
They have this, my one DM, I think he goes more kind of based on vibes. He looks at what he wants to throw at us, and he sees, how'd they do in that last encounter? When was the last time they leveled up? Have they done enough in my head to justify that they're better at what they do now? Whereas my other DM, I think he's written from beginning to end when he wants us to level, because that's just how he is. He just fucking writes things.
Yeah.
But I think for me, XP I don't like it. It drags me down. There's too much math. I hate math, Adam. I like simple addition, and that's it. And I don't like math. Once there's more than 2 numbers on the screen, I get it out of here. I don't want it. I don't like it. I don't want my players going and random things for XP. Milestone is where it's at. Because
I am no supporter of math, overuse of math either, for sure.
No. So but it's like, you look at a timeline, and you can put little points, and you can move them along that line. And like, say you were like, well, I didn't think they were gonna get to level 14 until they dealt with this big thing, but they've accomplished things and they've done extra things on the side, and you're like, I'm gonna give it to them because that's the beauty of Milestone.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
You
like,
can vibe it.
Here's the thing again. Once more, this comes back again to what we keep saying is it is all about that individual person, right? The GM themselves. Like once more, GMs, you gotta, in my opinion, okay. Let me preface it first before we say all of that. Like, I absolutely agree and understand with everything you're saying. I love Milestone too. I usually will run all of my campaigns with Milestone as well. I don't dislike XP, however, because, and here's why. The biggest problem with Milestone is that it gives the GM way too much control over when the players will level up. Whereas XP, it does, like, regardless of whatever, you will eventually level up. So long as, like, and to be fair, obviously there's a whole thing of like, well, if you can only XP if you kill things and if you whatever. And it's like, I don't agree with that either. I still think you should get XP even if you if you complete an encounter, whether or not you spilt a single drop of blood, you should still get XP for that. You should get XP for role play. You should get XP for just doing cool, interesting stuff that was out of the box, like whatever. That's why I like XP, because it gives you, the player, regardless of anything else, it incentivizes you to do certain things. For one,
to be active.
To be active and engaged, as well as you have a point that you can see that I can get there. And I can get there through my personal means as I progress. Whereas with Milestone, it is always up to the GM basically to tell you when you have finally, apparently by their estimation, reached that point where you can now level up. Which has, unfortunately, in my experience, it has a huge tendency to again run on. Where again, like I said, specifically for the reason of balancing. It's like GMs, we can get stuck in a place where, like, well, we feel comfortable with GMing and setting encounters for this specific level of player and character. Even though it's like, well, but the point of having character classes, we see all the stuff we can do. We chose this class at early levels because we want to get there. We want to get there, at least for me anyway. I don't necessarily want to speak for anybody else, but for me, I'm like, a lot of the cooler stuff is at the later levels, and I want to get to that point, and I don't want to sit here again playing freaking years at a time where we're like, and again we get like literally the last session is when we get to level 20 or level 60, or we get to that point where you get the coolest aspect. Because again, obviously level 20 for most classes doesn't even really matter, because level 20 capstone is usually pretty bad. Like we talked about that in our class episode. Level 20 capstone abilities are usually pretty not great. So it doesn't. So level 20 isn't a hint. But again,
there's like an aesthetic
14
thing of looking at your character sheet and seeing a big 2-0 up there, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, there is, because it also feels like you made that accomplishment too.
Like, I want to play a level 20 barbarian. I want to fuck around.
Yeah, absolutely. Because level 20 barbarians get some of the best like level 20 stuff too. But even the best thing too is like, even getting to level 20, in my opinion, shouldn't be the end all of the campaign. Like, I want to get to level. It usually is. But
it's like, usually way before that.
I want to get to level 20, and I want to be able to experience and enjoy my level 20 character. We got this way. We got this ability. We're here. Like, I want to have a decent amount of time, not a lot necessarily. Like I said, maybe like, a month of play, so 4 sessions.
Four good sessions is...
You can maybe, well, again, it depends also what you do in those sessions. Again, if half of those sessions are dedicated to like RP, it's like, well, maybe you didn't really do anything that really utilizes much of your level 20s character. But
unless that's what you're built for.
Unless that's what you're built for.
Unless you're me in that Tomb of Annihilation game.
Yeah, unless
it's not
like,
fun.
Yeah, it's like, it's like you didn't really get to... Level 20 was not really much different from like, 17. It was, 16 or 17. It's like, but that's why for me, it's like, I also like to play at higher levels, right? Because then it's like, with Milestone, you start at higher levels, you already get access to a plethora of cool abilities that you can take your time with getting familiar with and having at your disposal right from jump. And then, you can maybe take a little bit more time to level up. Like, again, within 2 years, that's why for the best campaigns I've been a part of, our homebrew campaigns, was like, we either started at a high level, or conversely, we leveled up quickly to then get to that like medium level, and then it started to like kind of. I
would say
that's almost similar to XP, where the higher you go, the longer it takes. The longer it takes. It's like,
So I'm gonna say this, Adam. I think this will kind of help you understand why I look at that 2.5 years so fondly, is that we were inexperienced, as a
Fair.
group.
That's fair.
This was us learning together. And so the second campaign that we're in, we've been playing for a little bit and we're level 9. Now, in the first campaign, I'd say we got up to like level 5 decently quick, and then it slowed pretty heavily until we got to like, I would say a couple levels higher. He sped it up a little bit because he was like, "Oh God," and like we were kind of like, "I want to be a little," we're like little kids. We're like, "Dad, Dad, give me levels."
It's like, can we get? I want to get this ability. This ability is one of the cornerstones of this class.
But like he was definitely trying to figure out where he wanted us to be, and I know he was going off the books as well, and so I don't know. I can't tell you 100% certain whether the books told you to level up them at a certain time entirely or not,
or if they chose themselves.
But by the end, I mean, it was a damn journey, and like it did feel good. Like there was a hiccup where we all died, and that really, I mean, look, you know me, we've talked about this many times. I don't get hang-ups when I die.
Mm-hmm.
I am ready within 20 minutes with a new character pretty much every time, because I'm a psychopath. And so like I'm good.
You pretend to be. You're much more hung up than you like people to probably believe.
But like I can leave that out of the game.
Absolutely.
When we TPK'd,
as you should.
When we TPK'd, when we TPK'd that one time, and I had already died once and come back as that character. We TPK'd, I was like, to me, I wanted to be done with the campaign.
Yeah, you were livid. Yeah.
I was like, because I was mad at people at the table.
Yeah, for fucking up, in your opinion.
Honestly, more than half the party could have survived. I might have died.
Yeah.
But they just did not do it well. And it was like, and it was this mix.
I can see that being aggravating.
And my DM, I think, was like, what did you want me to do? Like, he was looking at me like, what? Like, I can't. Like, I can't. This is the story. Like, I can't. And I got it, and I wasn't mad at him, but it was one of those things of like, part of me was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I want to scrap this whole thing and start again.
That is one of the biggest risks you run with a TPK. Is and like
2 weeks later,
once again, taking your party out of it if they are attached to a character to a certain extent. And for me, I am like I get that too, because for me, it's like I usually put a lot of effort and a lot of time into ingratiating a character in any game that I'm starting. Like I'm like, hey, I got that backstory. I write out like a page long kind of backstory thing, where I'm like, hey, there's some characters where I leave it more open ended, where I'm like, I don't want to be too obtuse or whatever, But
we do often have a little bit of a different school of thought on that. Like I usually don't become attached to a character until I played them for a while, because that's how I write their story.
Yeah, I create characters from the beginning that I'm like, I can just drop this character into anything, and I can I can switch up their backstory or whatever along to fit into whatever narrative and world. But this is the character that I want to play here for this campaign. Like this, from what you told me, like I'm like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, and the thing is like we had a session 0, like a double session 0, like where we, instead of playing that next week, we all kind of hung out. We had some drinks and we made new characters.
Yeah.
Now, of course, me, again, psychopath here, I already had my character.
Sure.
All I had to do was
tons of other characters. So if he dies, I'm not against like a.
All I had to do was tie in a couple things, and I was good to go. So I then became DM number 2 and helped other people make their characters and help them with like stats and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we had that one week where we all just kind of hung out, and like there was a little biting, a little like, you definitely fucking got us killed. Like
it was your fault. Like, you screwed
but by
up.
the end of it, we were all hugging it out. And the next week later, we were in a whole different city. We were at a different point in the story. He was like, there has been a little bit of a time skip since that incident. Like things are not going well. You get to deal with the aftermath of that as a different group with a different person in charge of you. Here it is. And we had like kind of a shorter, not a shorter session, but it was a more role play intro session to all the characters. And he was like, look, you guys have been working together, so you do know the basics about each other. Let's tell everyone the basics about your character.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. I love that.
Like I would say it took 2 or 3 sessions to kind of get back into it, and we were good. And this is kind of a balancing thing. It's he, you know, how do I put this? He, I think, was worried that his encounter, because he did tweak it, was too difficult for our level. Mm-hmm. And this is something, and for both players and GMs to remember, there is no, in my opinion, a definite, this is a purely balanced encounter.
There are no 100%.
No. And so
there
like
are none
you can look at an encounter that you're like, yeah, this is meant to be a medium difficulty encounter. This should not be life-threatening, but it should take away some of their resources. And you could throw this at them, and you could be like, yeah, they've handled this before.
Yeah.
And someone dies.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Like, this is not what I want.
That wasn't supposed to happen. And then, conversely, there can be like encounters where you're just like, there's no way they will ever possibly defeat this at all.
And they'll roll over.
And they'll just steamroll it. Like, just like that. That's how I've been in both of those things where it's just like, we're in situations or encounters where it's just like, oh, there's no way we can do this, or where people can make bad choices to say the dice can just be against you all night. Again, that's the point where there are no 100%. The dice, no matter how powerful you are, if you just roll crappy, like there's almost not much you can do at that a lot of the time, unless you're facing significantly like weaker enemies. But that's the point being, like, we'll roll it back again in regards to balancing, like with level, you know what I mean? Like with the milestone level, I feel like a lot of GMs take it specifically because of that fear of like, I can't balance higher level encounters. Whereas like with me, I'm like, I love that. I love higher level characters. And that gives me the creative freedom to just make some cool, dope shit to throw at them, to be like, yo, let's see what you can do here. Because that's what my campaign. That's what my campaign did. Where it's like we were not only were we like higher level, but we also, it was a high magic campaign. So our GM gave us a lot of cool items, a lot of cool stuff. To be fair, there were less of us. Like in one of the campaigns, it was just me. It was me and one of my friends, and then my partner who was GMing. So it was just three of us technically. But she gave us like some NPCs as like heal bots or like some support, but it was primarily us. And so we got some like bolstered cool items. We were higher level. And it was so much freaking fun. Because she also was like, she just threw a ton of like cool homebrew stuff at us as well, like, or just beefed up certain like creatures that we wanted to fight or wanted to interact with, like to fit us. And while some of it was difficult at times, it was like because we worked in tandem, we had good choices. It was super cool because we got to use all of our abilities and everything. Same thing with like other campaigns that I run. I like that because it's like I can now homebrew to kind of go around. It's almost like a puzzle for me, where it's just like, okay, how can I make this encounter still cool and fun for the players while also providing a decent amount of difficulty, even against like what some people might consider their broken abilities or items, you know? And I just like, I understand it. I get for a lot of people not necessarily be that way, where it feels daunting, it feels stressful, and it feels, I understand that.
I'm a low level guy all the way. That's just me.
Yeah, but for me, it's like you absolutely can find ways and ways that aren't just simply, like we talked about, aren't just simply you shutting down like a character's abilities or skills, or basically being like, no, you can't do that, or that's too overpowered, that's busted, you can't do that. You know, I mean, hell, certain people think that the feat lucky that we talked about is a broken feat, when it's like, in my opinion, not at all.
Not really.
And in any way, shape, or form. And I get why, because people are like, oh, well, you can just have an enemy reroll attack, or you can reroll enemies, but it's like you can only do that once per instance.
Three times a day.
It's 3 times a day, and it's only once per instance. Like you can't be like, oh, I failed that save, I reroll. Oh, I failed again, I reroll. You can't do that. It's literally just you just get an advantage. You get one advantage on a thing.
It's really not. It's
it's so not busted, but people feel like it is.
Again, but it comes back to balancing, because people don't balance their encounters.
That's what I'm saying.
So
it's about how you balance the encounter to begin.
Don't let your characters rest. Then, like, if you don't want them to get the stuff back, they have another encounter before they rest.
Again, depends on where they are. If they are out in the wilderness, if they're camping, you can throw random encounters at them to interrupt rests. If they are in a dungeon where they're having to move, or in a like a castle, enemy territory where they have to move through, hit them with some lower level as it goes up and up. You deplete some of their resources, whatever. It's like, again, there were 3 of us at our table who had, like, in another campaign, who there were 4 players and 1 GM, and there were 3 of us at the table who had the lucky feat, And it's like, at one point, it's like, I mean, again, it was like, for me, I take it because I am an infamous, habitually bad roller. Like, I just roll super low on my dice all the time. And so I take lucky because it's like, I want to have the opportunity to at least maybe succeed at things, you know what I mean? Because that might also play into why I like higher level play, because it also, like, it makes lower level rolls not as horrible. Because if you're low level, like, you roll low, there's nothing you can do. You'll just keep failing. At higher level, you still have the chance to succeed because you have such a high bonus, even if you low roll, or even if you roll low. But it's like, even with the lucky feat, it's like, heck, give some of the bosses lucky. Give them the ability to re-roll. And she did. Like, she gave a number of our enemies, like, either the ability to re-roll or the ability to, like, screw up our re-rolls or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And, like, again, for me, it's like, it didn't necessarily matter, because also, like, if you give the enemies higher DC for, like, their spell saves or their attack modifiers, like, you can scale them to us in a similar vein, where it's like, that is essentially where it's at. But now the players have more access to their abilities and features that they get with their classes.
Well, that's the whole point of Milestone,
and then, exactly.
In my opinion.
And then, but it's still balanced in the sense where, like, they're at their level. You don't have to throw everybody at their level, right? But for me, like, for my games, I usually always bump up certain creatures or abilities to a similar vein of, like, the players, because I like those epic level campaigns as well, where I run them, where I'm like, yeah, let's go, like, level 12, 15 or whatever, and you guys can have all these cool items. Like, you guys can get 1 legendary, like 1 very rare, maybe 2 rare, and, like, maybe 2 uncommon, or you can get, like, 2 very rare, or maybe 1 very rare, 2 rare, and, like, 3 or 4 uncommon, or basically like that, depending on what you want to go. I give multiple, like things of being like, hey, this is what you get if you choose to get the certain items based off of your level as well.
Yeah.
But it's just, with Milestone, my only gripe with it is, if a GM is going to do Milestone, then you need to be, in my opinion, much more open to giving them levels at a reasonable time. It gives GMs too much control over that player's character, which I'm not a huge fan over, because it's like,
it sounds like we've had 2 very different experiences of it.
I've had good experiences with Milestone. I've had bad. Again, I still do love Milestone, because in my opinion, I'm like, in regards to XP at higher levels begins to become a problem, because it's like, especially if you have more characters, right? If you file XP rules, the more characters you have in an encounter, the less overall experience you get. And so it's like, again, for me, I still love Milestone probably more than XP, because it does give you the free will to level people up, like, at a reasonable time. It gives you more flexibility. My only issue with it, though, is that a lot of GMs, from my experience, what I've seen, they have a tendency to again, get comfortable with a very specific level. And then it's just like, well, they're the ones that are like, well, I decide when you've actually had, like, a real milestone to level up. Even if you've literally completed all kinds of, like, emotional, like, character arcs, if you've defeated, like, really powerful monsters and creatures, and you're sitting here like, why haven't we leveled up yet? Like, we've done all of this stuff. We've felt what feels like pretty significant accomplishments, especially story-wise, but we're still level 7? Like, what do you as the GM, consider to be, like, significant milestone achievement where we can now level up and gain access to more abilities? Like, it gives too much of a with that freedom, once again, comes with the responsibility, in my opinion, because that's power, right? That the milestone gives GM power, and therefore it also affords them the responsibility to be reasonable, rational, and fair and not just necessarily keep a party at a certain level because, again, they're comfortable and it's more convenient or easy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If your players want to level up, let them level up. Like, give them, or start them at a higher level and then keep it there. You know what I mean? If you want to, like, whatever. It's like that. So that is my thing with balancing in regards to either XP versus milestones. At XP, at the very least, you always have that goal, that hit. GM can't change that. They can't fuck with that. If they do, that's a whole other problem right there. But obviously with XP, depending on how your GM affords you XP and stuff, like if it's like, oh, you can only do it if you kill monsters, like that's shitty. That's crappy. You should also get it for whatever. Because it's also the fact too with XP though, to be fair, a GM could also give you way more. They could just be like, hey, yeah, you get extra XP because of your cool thing that you did, or you get extra XP because you role played really well, or you get extra XP for getting through this thing. You know, it's like, I feel like XP still gives you flexibility, but it also keeps the GM honest to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It keeps them honest from again, controlling your character in this way, where you're just like, I still get to, and to be fair, GMs, they still can absolutely abuse this. They can't just give you less XP or be like, well, you weren't here, so you don't get any XP, or you didn't kill, or like you didn't get the killing blow on a monster, so you don't get the XP because you have to kill the monster yourself. That's all terrible too. But at the very least, it's like you see, hey, I have an idea of how far I am away from this next milestone, or this next progression for my character. And I like that. Whereas with milestone, you're just kind of stuck here being like completely at the GM's, mercy, at like, when do we get the next thing? Can I just ask for one? Like,
yeah, I have I don't know if you've experienced this. This is something that kind of bugs me. I don't know if you've had an experience where you have a DM who, when players can't make it to the table and you play without them, they then are behind.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
I'm not a fan of that either.
Because in my scenario, usually if people can't make it, we just don't play.
I'm still fine with playing without players. Like I say that all the time for my groups, like play without me.
We just don't. And like that's just been kind of how we do things because we don't want people to miss stuff. I think there was a point where we did, when someone was consistently like not able to show up, but now if we can't make it, like, sorry guys, we're just not playing this week, we'll have to postpone. But that was something that, like, when I was first hearing about D&D stuff and talking to people about it, was there were a lot of people who were like, oh no, I mean, I'm playing whether or not everyone makes it or not, and if they're not there, their character doesn't get XP for that session. And like, to me,
I don't agree with that.
That seemed like such a weird, like, I'm gonna punish someone.
Yeah, no, for not attending because
their life
has taken priority. Yeah,
like I'm sorry, but like I love D&D, and like obviously we're putting in time to record stuff about it.
Yeah,
and like
we're passionate
about it.
Like, here's the thing I'll say too, on the other side of that, right? It's like I also do understand, however, if, say, for instance, like with the, I have heard stories and even experienced a little bit, not as much, but like with people who are systematically there less than they actually are there. You know what I mean? Like they attend less. And so, but then so like having that kind of thing where it's like we have gone through all of this story development, we've all leveled up, and then for that player basically to come back then and be like, oh, I'm also level 12 or whatever, and it can absolutely have an effect that might feel for other players to be like, well, you weren't here for all of that.
My thing is like if a player is only making 2 out of every 6 sessions, maybe you talk to that player and you're like, if you can't make more than this, you can't go to the table.
Yeah, I mean, well, but again,
which I know sucks, but I think to me like makes more sense.
If you like that person as a person, but they're just not involved, it's like, it's you don't necessarily want to be like, well, you can't play with us anymore because you keep missing sessions or whatever, which is like, I understand that feeling too, but at the same time, I also do get it where it is just like, oh, well, we put in all of this work, we did all of this stuff, but now you're essentially reaping the benefits, so to speak, of our whatever, because obviously then if they come back and then they're like a lower level and then they're not doing much damage or they're not measuring up the same as we are, and it's like, I know that won't be fun for them either, and maybe that might be maybe that in and of itself might actually be a decent or a fair punishment, so to say, because it's like, hey, yeah, you weren't here, and so like you can still play with us, but
I think it
because you didn't
depends
put in the same work. So it's like that's what I can see both sides, because I also agree. I don't like that either. Like well,
Nah,
especially if
I
it's
think
only like
that's
one session, right? If it's like you
oh
missed
no.
one session, or if it's like an emergency and you're like, oh well, you don't get the benefits of this because again, your
No.
real life that takes priority at certain moments
I think that's
took
and
priority there.
I urge, we're all people. I urge if you're having a problem with a player like that, I think talk to the other people at the table and see how they feel. Because it's one of those things of like, this is a balance thing too. It's a balance of like, are you like if you can't consistently make it to
If you
something, then
cannot commit
unfortunately,
to this,
then you're not going to be a part of it. Like
then
that's
don't.
to
Or
me,
then don't. Like don't say that you're going to be committed to
no.
something and be a part of it, but then not ever show up or show
Okay.
up so little where it's just like, okay, you know
To
what?
me, the way I look at
If
it,
it's not a priority, then that's okay. That's okay. It's not a priority.
but
But
I don't have
then
room. I don't have room for you at the
don't
table.
don't pretend that it is, and then
Yeah.
keep
No, me as a
failing
player,
certain expectations and such.
me as a player, we had people who I told I talked to the DM. I was like, this isn't gonna work. Like, if this is the kind of table you want, sure, but like, I'll leave because
Yeah,
this
it's
is
like
fucking. This is a
I'm
joke.
not really interested in. Yeah,
Like, I don't
I
care when
agree.
they're here. I don't really want to interact. Like, because they're not going to be here next week. So what does it matter what I do?
Yeah,
And so,
it offers no real
because
progressive or connection.
again, and
Progression.
this is me being a spoiled brat because I've played with the same people for 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, no, you've gotten exceedingly lucky. Like that
Is that and like, dude, there are some people talk like I know that once this ends, I'm pretty sure the group is gonna dissolve and I'll have to figure out what to do and it's gonna suck.
Well, I mean, buddy, you and me, like I got you.
Yeah,
Like
that's
you
true.
and I can do stuff. In fact, you still haven't invited me for a guest star appearance on there yet. I'd be interested in
Well,
checking that out.
I don't know what they're I don't know if my DM I don't think for our Monday game is gonna want like we're kind of like booked. How do I put this?
I
Neither of
feel
my
it.
DMs
You're
want to
full
add
up.
any more people because we added
I'm
someone.
fucking with you, buddy.
I
I'm
know,
best.
dude. Wait, I had this is kind of like one of those things that like that I feel like this is the only place to throw this out here. And like if the people who are in this ever see this, I'm not making fun of anyone. I
They
love it.
probably will.
But we had in my Tuesday game, we had someone who was added, and the DM added them at the behest of one of the players. And most of like half the players knew this person and the other half did not. And we are pretty deep into this campaign.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to a couple other people and they're like, so why do we add this person? And I'm sitting here like, I know this guy and I know he's never played before. And he's starting at like 15th level.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I kind of get why you're maybe not so happy about this. And it's been fine. It's one of those things where like he shows up every week. If he can't show, he's very good about letting people know.
I mean, that's
he's
all
doing
I care
everything
about.
right. He's not super in the role playing yet. He tries, and like
well,
I try to give
how
him.
many people do you have for your party?
Oh, let's see. Me, 6.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty big party already. Like 6.
That's our standard.
Yeah, I would say 6. 6 is the max usually. Like 6 is usually 5 or 6 is usually the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I would say.
I like 4.
4, no, 4 is great. Like I said, like probably 4 I'd say is like the lower end, and then 6 is a higher end. But between 4 and 6 is usually the sweet spot in my opinion. I've done with 2. 2 is fun too, but you do have to be a little bit more deliberate.
I don't know if I could do 2. I could do
2
3.
is fun, dude. It is because again, you get obviously you get a lot more focus and everything on the 2 of you and such. But again, it would have to be very specific in terms of like you guys would probably have to be a little stronger, more powerful. Like that's what I like. So running a game for like 2 people, I'm down for because it like that also allows me to like bump them up too to make.
I guess the thing for me is my favorite thing to do is to role play at other people, not at the DM. I role play with the DM, obviously.
Well,
but
I think some of the funnest can be like buddy cop, for instance, right? Like
that's which is what I'm saying. But for me, it's like I need one other person because like if I don't want to talk to this person, then I'll have someone else to throw things at.
Talk to this person.
I'm a petulant child.
Yes, clearly.
I like having 2 people. Because D&D is my social outlet, so there you go.
Sure,
for me,
fair enough.
It was a weird thing of like we have this. It's essentially like someone handed us a small child, and was like, take care of this child. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah,
And he's trying, but he doesn't know. And so like I remember like after the first session, like he sat, what he did do, and I think this was awesome to me, is I knew this was going to happen, but pretty much all of our party had no idea.
Sure.
Is we all get into the Discord call, and then this newer guy, he pops in, and Cody goes, "Oh, I gotta let you guys know, our friend is going to sit in and listen to us play. He is interested and wants to hear us play a session.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me a number of times.
And I've done that with other. I did that with other friends because I was like, we play a game. I want to see what your other game sounds like.
Yeah.
And so, he sat in on a session. He didn't interrupt. He was being very, cordial. It was great. And at the end of the session, he was like, "Oh, he's going to play with us next week." And we're all sitting here like, I don't think there's going to be an opportunity to introduce anybody next week, but okay. And he introduced him. I think it went fairly okay. Within the next couple of sessions, he kind of like tied his character in pretty well. But the player himself like wasn't really role playing a whole lot. And like we tried, but it's like there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, if he's new, like
it was funny because he kind of attached himself to the other guy who doesn't role play a whole lot. So it was one of those things of like, well, I know I have two guys in the corner who aren't going to talk as much, but like they're listening. They're and like when they get called upon, like in class, they answer. Like it wasn't,
well, obviously he probably would gravitate more towards a person who is similar to him, more quiet. And so
I will say, for the couple of us that are like role play centric, we are the ones who move the story forward in that sense. They kind of were coming to me because I'm usually the guy. Like I don't like this, but when I play D&D, I'm a bit of a DM rules lawyer because I get annoyed when people like do things that don't make sense. And I'm a lot better now.
Sure, no. I can also say questions. I can be like that at times. Although to be fair though, maybe I shouldn't say DM rules. Like I always try to do it like within reason, but I'm also the type of person like I love rule of cool, right? It's like if a person does something and they're like, and that's like really cool, I'm like, let's find out a way for them to do that. But I am, to be fair, I usually I'm like, let's find a way for them to do that still within the confines of the core rules to a certain extent. But I also like a lot of homebrew. So I mean, honestly, I'm kind of all over the place.
I question
all over the place.
I am a questioner.
Yeah, no, me too.
I will clarify. I will try to get clarification on things because I'm like, that doesn't add up to me. And I'll ask a question and they'll give me an answer. And sometimes I'm satisfied with it and sometimes I'm not. And so I think some of the other players, because I'm a stronger personality at the table, after the session, they're come up to me in Discord like, how do you feel about this? And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, I really don't want to talk shit.
Yeah, if you've established yourself as kind of a...
And this is, this also ties into balance in a way. There's a balance of things that happen at a table. And it was one of those things that luckily I could be like, I get your frustration. Let me throw you this as like well, what do you want? Like if someone's interested and we as a group know this person, what are you supposed to just say no? You can't join our little club. Like,
well, that's what I'm saying. It's the same thing as being like if it's a friend and they don't show up,
it doesn't work out. And like, dude, and here's the thing. And to me, it's like if he started having attendance issues, if this person started like not showing up, not paying attention, I pull him aside. I'm not even the DM. I pull him aside.
Yeah, if he's not
like,
engaged,
hey, dude, get your shit together,
like,
or
like
this isn't like get your shit together, or this isn't for you. And the reason I will, I don't like being harsh. The reason I am with D&D is because it's something I put a lot of time into. It's something I look forward to. It
requires a commitment. I mean, the GM alone does so much work.
Oh my god! The least I can do, and like
at least be respectful of that.
I don't think, for me, I I have the attention span to DM effectively the way that the people I play with do. I don't think I like one shots. I like short shit. That's me all day because it's fun. Sure. But I have a lot of respect for the fact that they put in
long form. Yeah, long form.
Put in a lot of effort, and always remember that. Unless you're at like a terrible table where the story is just not there,
and the GM is shit, and like basically,
I was trying to be nicer, but
and the like GM is utter garbage. Then sure, then fuck that,
you know what? You don't have to have the same respect. But I've been playing with these people like I have a lot of respect for the effort they put in.
They put so much time into it.
But if I don't like their story, they did take time to write it.
That's what I'm saying. So, you can also be like, I'm not.
You can be critical but appreciative.
Yeah, you can be critical, but if anything, be respectful and aware if they did put in work that they did. It's like you can still, even if it's not good, you can still tell when a person has put actual time and effort into this.
They've
thing.
thought about
like,
this.
It's like, okay, that didn't really, it wasn't really executed great or well.
Oh yeah, like dude,
but you can tell that they're engaged, that they were passionate, and you're like, I respect, I appreciate that so much. I'm sorry, unfortunately, it didn't, at least to me anyway. Maybe some to the others it did, but for me personally, it just didn't really hit the way that I like usually. Yeah. But I still love and appreciate the fact that you did this for us. That's amazing. Yeah, thank you.
And so, like, me as a player, I will call out other people for not respecting that.
Good for you. Good
and
for
it's
you.
Well, some people probably don't like being called out, and so it's something to think about.
Nobody likes being called out.
Don't walk into a new table and do this. But man, if you're an OG at a table, and I remember there was a time where I had to leave this campaign for an extended period of time, and I ended up coming back, and I was welcomed with open arms, and it was very like, oh, thanks guys, that was big for me. It was
very sweet, very nice. Like, I'm glad to be back.
And I came in and I assumed my role again as that enforcer of like, hey, fucking look at him. Yeah. He's talking to you.
Focus up. All right.
Oh my! I am so guilty of doing that. Because
that's a lot. That is a lot.
We have some players that they'll get on tangents, and my DM, I can see his face.
Oh yeah,
because he's a teacher and he gets that teacher face. If he's like, these people are not paying attention to us. I'm like, hey guys, can we fucking pay attention? Because I'm about to lose my shit.
No, that's
and I'll be that bad guy all day.
That's pretty hilarious. That is very alive.
I mean, you know
extreme. Me. I do. I've played with you before.
You've seen. Well, no, you know me in the sense of when I have my moment of I break for just a second, and you're like,
no. It's like, hey, easy, Sammy, relax, calm down. But it's honestly though, I do like that. I respect him because I also feel that way as well. Where I'm like, again, if people aren't involved, how I usually handle it though, for me, if people are like whatever, I'm usually I come in character. I'm like, so hey, are we gonna keep going? Are we let's move along here? We're like, hey, back to the game, where
I've done that too.
I've had to do that. I usually don't necessarily address them
as people,
as personally, outside of game. I usually try to address it in game, where I'm just like, hey, all right, we're doing this thing now. Where were we again? Are we here in this this moment right now? Cool, perfect. Let's continue. Let's move on. Is usually how I try to address that. But I would find that goddamn hilarious to see you literally just call somebody out on their shit just straight up. I would be like, fantastic. I would find that so freaking comical.
And this is something I think that is more common now. Obviously, when D&D was a pen and paper, you're all around a big table game, whether that's the coffee table in your living room, a crappy folding table in your garage, or nowadays a literal gaming table. But now, and this is
it's become so much more mainstream in the last number of years.
It's also a lot more common now to play over the internet,
online.
And that's something that I think people. This is something that there is a balance of you have to pay attention, but you're also you're at your computer and you're in your own space.
You have so much access to such
you're forgetting and stuff. It's not exactly the same. And I remember when we first started, because of COVID, we first started playing online. We didn't play a homebrew game because my DM was like, I don't know how this is going to go. Mm-hmm. So we started with Curse of Strahd, which was an interesting choice.
That's a heavy one.
But hey, it was good. It worked out really well. But for I would say the first month and a half, 2 months, there were some times where it was all right, let's fucking we gotta tune in. Yep. Because it was a different time and it was new, and now I'm used to it. Now that's what we do. We don't do in person anymore. Whether it's because scheduling is hard, we're not all right next to each other. And also now in my other game, we have someone who lives in a whole different state. So it's this all ties back in. Is you also have to have balance at your table of there's interaction between people, there's interactions between the DM and people, or people and people. And it's one of those things you have to put in an effort, and that's everybody, which I think is something that we tie back to a lot because of the different people we played with and how long we've played.
I mean, especially I feel this effort is great in any avenue that you're effort is probably the most attractive quality anybody can have in anything. because I put a lot of effort into basically everything that I do, and I'm like, hey, I respect another person who does it, because I hate the whole, the whole try hard, dynamic and stuff that people have come up with lately. It's like, if you are legitimately passionate and interested in this thing, don't be afraid to show it. You shouldn't be shamed for showing it. Now, people can be intense, right? People can definitely overcompensate and go to a crazy, ridiculous state, which I feel like, again, isn't necessarily try hard so much as it's just like, they might have a bit of an issue and a problem that they might, they maybe need to have therapy on or something potentially. But it's like, if you're here, D&D of anything is a commitment. It requires, at least if you want to do it well and fun. If it's something you just want to dabble in, that's fine. You know what I mean? I'm sure there are certain tables that just probably play like,
dude, go to your local game store.
Once
go to
a month,
place that does like events.
Find like
things.
a drop in, find like a one night, one shot thing or whatever, or even look online for like one shots if you just want to like dip your toe in and have that little thing where it's not necessarily going to require much of a commitment. It's just like a one and done. That's fine too. But if you're going to be a part of a long form campaign that your GM has clearly put time and effort into running, into making, even if it's a module, it still takes time to like read through.
Prepping is a huge thing.
Prep to specifically to run well. If they're doing it well, then that's like, or at the very least, if they're putting an effort, if they're clearly putting an effort to try, then you yourself should also at least try to put in that same amount of effort. If obviously your GM is literally like, they have a thing and they're just like, yeah, so you guys are supposed to go to this one area here and make a check like that. It's like, if they're not putting if your GM isn't putting any effort in, then it's like, okay, whatever. Again, feel free to tune out and do anything else. Like, I've been in a couple of those situations where it's just like, my GM is just clearly, I don't even know, something's just not right. They are not into it, like, really. And I'm just like, well, I'll just be on my phone then while I wait for some shit to actually happen, because they aren't actually engaged in their literal world that they're trying to engage us in. So like, why should I be? But if they are, then the least you can do is at least, reciprocate a little bit.
Just have your ears open to make sure you're doing that. But you know what? I think this is a perfect segue. This is about balance. We've talked about people balance. We've talked about some things.
Item balance, some feature balance.
I want to talk, because we haven't really, about something that maybe requires a little bit too much effort at the table, that maybe some people don't like very much, and that's getting real into building a character a certain way. I'm talking about power gaming.
Power gaming. I mean, it was inevitable that this is where it would end up. Like, we've been basically like tiptoeing.
We've been skirting around it,
lightly, but that this in essence might be. And to be fair, all the things we talked about technically goes into this, right?
Yes.
Plays into this of the aspect, the concept of power gaming, being a power gamer.
Munchkin,
what that really means.
That's an old term.
Because a lot of people utilize Munchkin or power gaming to apply to certain individuals or situations that might not always be really accurate or correct.
Yes. Now, we have touched on these things. We've made jokes about these things.
We've said ourselves
in our class video. You poked fun at me and I poked fun at myself about power gaming. And we've talked about some of the stuff that we've done that could be considered power gamey. I think you less than me overall. I don't think what you do is exactly the same. But
that's the thing. It depends. Like, because for you do maybe specific like known mechanical builds that are known to like break the game or even be trolly to a certain extent. Whereas I like to take powerful stuff and be powerful, which can come across as that. But for somebody like you, might not as much. But for other people, it's like, well, you're clearly like power gaming and taking all the best choices.
Yeah, I'm going to give a little bit of context here now, and this just definitely plays into what we both mentioned. You enjoy high level play.
I do.
I am more of a low to mid level.
But you like gimmick shit, though.
Well, I like it. I don't bring it to the table very often. I have accidentally made some things that were very powerful, and using that knowledge that I gained from doing that by accident, I am the kind of person that when I build a character, I build them to be successful.
Same. And that's what I'm all about. I like.
And you know what? I think there's a distinct difference between taking a gimmick or something that is arguably broken or very good and relying on that exclusively to decimate everything in front of you. There's
to trivialize any and all encounters,
and like to do
just
it.
Cheese. You're cheesing, is what it is. You're just cheesing.
You look at we'll use video games as an example. There's plenty of instances of like everyone knows this one thing is really good. So what am I going to do? I'm going to only use that. I'm going to
use just that thing. I'm not going to like make it flavorful at all. I'm not going to like. I'm just going to do this thing. I'm just going to do the same exact thing with this one thing over and over again to just win. I literally you press square to win. You press one button to win, and that's it.
And so
that's not fun. I agree. No, I don't agree with that, and I don't like that too much either.
To me, like there is a distinct difference between playing rogue to a certain level and then being like, I'm gonna take paladin now, and I'm just gonna smite all the time, and I'm gonna get
sneak and smite.
I'm gonna sneak attack and smite, and I'm gonna get my extra attack, and I'm gonna decimate everything. But the difference, the thing is like, is there a story reason for this? That is the main thing.
You have some flavor involved.
You have to talk. This is something like. And we've touched on multi-classing a little.
We did talk about that in the multi-classing episode, I believe, about like taking levels just for like
abilities.
Just mechanically speaking, without any kind of homage to role play or flavor.
There's a way to do it, and I think this is a talk to your DM scenario. My Monday DM does not like multi-classing. He will do it. You can do it for story reasons and story reasons only, and you have to make your case. And then he'll say yes or no, and he is the ultimate decider. And I have no problem with that because he is looking at it logistically. He's trying to keep people from gaming the system.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. My Tuesday DM is definitely more like, yeah, okay. And he will let you mess around. The difference is that he is one of those guys that goes online and looks at Reddit and is like, this is broken. Don't let your players do this. And then he comes to me and he's like, no, you can't do that. Yeah. That's part of that build I saw. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's really not. Because you just told me and I didn't know about this until now.
Yeah, until you just told me about it. So
like there's the
part of that build
what is it? The sorcerer paladin combo where you just take sorcerer so that you have more smites.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, yeah, I guess that's gamey until you realize that you don't have like half of what makes paladin good, which is like
you're just a smite king is all. Paladin is powerful enough just by itself.
Like, my thing
is, don't really need sorcery.
My thing is like I'd let someone do that. You know why? Because once they nuke one monster into oblivion, I'm just gonna kill them. I would just have other things. There's not just one enemy.
And then again, that comes back into our thing about balance. Like you can just like, obviously people make this case a lot too for balancing. It's like, just give the monster more hit points or higher AC or whatever. It's like, yeah, that I feel like that is a viable means for sure. You can do that. You can also, make more monsters. Don't make like you can subvert your players' expectations by being like, hey, you thought this was the only monster or only creature in this room that you just used all your shit on? Unfortunately not. There you go. And then maybe they will also start to be a little bit more strategic about their allocation of resources or their use of resources. Like again, I don't agree with the whole, like we just said, you press square or X to win. Like I don't necessarily like if like all they're doing with the sorcerer paladin combo is they're like, yeah, I'm just smiting everything and I have more smites. I'm gonna smite. I'm smiting. It's like, okay, well.
But like that's not even.
I'm gonna give you something that's resistant or immune to freaking damage. Then
it's like, hey, guess what? We're fighting celestials now.
Yeah, it's a radiant damage. Yeah, you can't. Your smites do next to nothing now. So what are you gonna do? How are you going to adapt to the situation now?
I think.
It's like if they had that mentality of press square to win, then do what we said before. At that point, I'd say it's almost fair to then have an encounter specifically tailored to be like, hey. Because I don't know, because they do have that thing about being like, well, now you're targeting me, and it's like, yeah, I am.
You've made yourself a target.
But you've made yourself a target. You've made it should not be this easy to counteract your character. Your character should have some variety. Your character should have some diversity. Don't just rely on this one thing. Otherwise, it is not at all unrealistic for certain individuals or creatures or whatever to just completely shut you down. You put yourself in this situation. You shouldn't just expect us as the GMs to cater to the fact that you're a one pump chump, that you've got all of this, you got one thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if it fails, then what do you do?
I think
something else.
The way I look at it,
you can be good at that thing, and that's fine, but have at least a little something else. Have a plan B or something to fall back on.
I think for me, it's like if someone goes out of their way to do the math and really look at like what they can accomplish with the abilities that are in front of them, I don't really care. Like, if you want to do Sorcerer Warlock and do the bullshit like Machine Gun Warlock
the
thing,
coffee lock, the coffee
I don't care. That's sure. Fucking run it. Like, to me,
I would be interested in seeing a way around
I would, you know what? I would like to see the bullshit you could get up to with that.
Yeah.
And if my DM would let me play it,
so interested.
I would play it.
How they could do it. And I would let them play that in my game, and I'd be like, all right, what's a way I can break this? And like let's see how far you can go with this. Let's see how effective you can be. Yeah. And I'm gonna throw some cool stuff at you just to test it. I would love to test it for science. Let's do it.
Yeah, and like I think the main thing is like having a powerful character is not power gaming. What is power gaming is abusing a mechanic to its end all be all of like, you know what, when they wrote this 5, 6, 10 years ago, that was not what they thought you were going to do with it. And like,
and there have been many changes after the fact. All the new editions of books have made all the more potential mix and matches. You know, how can they possibly have foreseen everything?
There's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful. You know, I look at my rogue that's like rogue fighter. I built him not as, I mean, he is very sneaky, but his purpose in a fight is a midline fighter. I have 60 foot of range, and I can also stab you in the throat. And so I go back and forth between up in close, not in close. You know, I have ways of I can sit back here and throw things at you, or I'm gonna I can't do that right now. Well, I'm gonna get up close and do this. And it's like everyone at the table is like, well, yeah, you're powerful. And I'm like, yes. I did it on purpose.
Wrong with that, yeah.
I rolled well on my character. I've allocated my stats correctly.
Why wouldn't you want to be powerful? Why wouldn't you want to be good at what you do? Unless you have a specific character trope in mind where they're kind of like bad or whatever, which is like, you know, if you have fun with that, sure. But there shouldn't be anything wrong with the inverse about being good at what you do and wanting to be powerful and cool.
Yeah, because or you can play the character like they're not good at fighting, but they can offer other things. Like, you can't. That's not power gaming. That's making an effective character. And for some people, the way they allocate their stats and the way they do things is not as important to them, and that's okay.
As long as they don't start feeling salty or
because that's not
envious or whatever towards another person who is really good at what they do. Because then I feel like, again, that is where the whole concept of power gaming gets murky, where it's like people who feel, again, less effective or are feeling either like threatened or maybe jealous or whatever reasoning that there might be, like, hard to say for certain.
Like, oh, I feel less powerful.
Yeah, because you're powerful. Like, I've compared to you, like, I'm super weak and that makes me feel bad. And it's like,
and so what I do is I ask them, I'm like, all right, well, let's look at what you have on your character sheet.
Yeah, let's see how you can feel more, whatever. Because there's certain things that you can do that I probably can't.
Well, that was something that I ran into in my first campaign when we were kind of learning. Is I was a barbarian. I mean, I did well. I allocated my stats correctly.
Sure.
And then I died, and I built another character who also did really well. Before he was off-screened, you know, because he wasn't going to be a permanent character. And we had a ranger in the group. And you know, I remember like her making a comment at some point of like, I don't feel like I do anything. I'm like, okay, well, let's look at what. Let me look at your character sheet. And me and the DM, we looked at her character sheet, and I'm like, why do you have a 19 charisma?
No. Okay. And I don't know for certain. But I had literally.
We talked about this.
The exact same,
and I was like,
situation.
I'm like, why do you have 19 charisma?
Literally
and she's like, well, isn't that what I'm supposed to have? And I was like, no.
Why? What would you ever?
And I'm like, you want to one? You don't. I don't think you've ever talked to anyone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so let's see
Situation.
where you got that from. And we went in and we kind of moved some things around and looked at what she grabbed at certain levels. And I was like, how do you feel about changing this? How do you feel about doing this? And by the end of it, I'm like, all right, next session, let's see what you can accomplish. And
Yeah.
she was a lot better at what she wanted to do. And she was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm like, and she's like, well, you just know how to do this better. I'm like, no, it's because I looked at what I wanted to do and I allocated my stats to do exactly that thing.
That is what she means. It's like you know what all this stuff means, I guess, better than she does, and you were able to then apply that knowledge to make your character better.
My thing,
but that's not something that's bad.
No, and like my thing, especially with this like newer player we started playing with, is he asked me, he's like, well, what should I take here? And I'm like, well, okay.
What do you want to do?
Let's look at your options. What do you want to be better at? What do you feel like your character isn't?
What do you feel compelled towards? Like, what do you feel pulled
like,
towards?
Do you want to make something you're already good at better? Do you want to maybe shore up what you're good at in somewhere, in like something maybe you're not as good at? You want to shore it up a little? You know, what do you want this character to be able to do? And it's one of those things of like, that's not a bad thing. There are people who love building flawed characters who just
super detrimental. They cause all kinds of problems and trouble.
And like that, to me, that annoys me a little. Like, it depends on how deep you go with that.
I was gonna say it only annoys me if their detriments and flaws end up adversely affecting the party. Like they end up dragging everybody else down with them. If they just want to be bad at what they're doing and whatever, that's fine with me. I don't care about that. Like, that's like, hey, if you get something out of that, that's great. Because here's also the thing. I'm just gonna make it so that I'm powerful enough to handle myself. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, while I care about the party, I am also very much like, I'm like, yo, my character, if you guys all die, he's gonna run. Like, he's gonna be powerful enough to defend and increase his survivability as much as he can, and then help everybody else as well. But if you're just bad at what you do and you're gonna die easily, it's like there's only so much that I can do.
Yeah, and like so for me, it's like you look at power gaming and you look at you go on Google or whatever and you're like OP D&D builds, right? And you scroll through it and you're like, oh, I want to do this overpowered build. And to me, I guess it's an effective character, but you don't have to do everything it says to do.
But right? Effective at what? Like, I would even question that. Like, what is your intention in doing that?
I mean, all of these are combat.
If you just look up, like, again, powerful, like, what do you just want to be powerful simply for being powerful? Like, what is the real, like, for me, for instance, I love being powerful and having powerful characters, but I do that with specific intentions, like usually RP or story wise. It's like my wizard, for instance, literally from jump, his goal is to eventually try to ascend to become a god. And so to do that, he obviously has to be quite powerful. He has to be knowledgeable. He has to be versed in magic that suffuses his body. Like, he has to increase his likelihood of survival, of being able to manipulate magic. Like that therein coincides with his reasoning for being as powerful as he is. Now,
here's a bullshit example. And this is something that, like, I would be mad at. I would say this is something that would annoy me. This is an abuse of the spell Goodberry. Combined with Life Cleric. It's a level 1 spell. You get 10 berries.
Yeah, you get 10 berries.
Because of Life Cleric
for like 8 hours.
Because it's they last for where did it say how long they last? Either way, whatever it is, they
last for like 8 to 24 hours or something.
Yeah, something like that, right? So this is a first level spell that you don't even take a multi-classing, you just take it as Magic Initiate, and you take Life Cleric, so that each berry heals 4 hit points, which means as a level 1 spell, you can get 40 hit points of healing at level 1. Now, here's what annoys me, right? Is you can make this overpowered because you just eat all 10 berries, right?
Yeah.
If someone did this at my table and they're like, no, I'm healing 40 hit points every time I cast a spell. It's like, well, it takes longer. You can't just You can't cast a spell immediately. Someone eats 10 berries and they have 40 hit points, because you can't. Like, if you're doing this in melee combat,
does it not say that it takes an action to eat the berry?
I don't know, but like according to this website, someone sees this and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna do that," and I'm like, first of all, why are you looking up?
Yes, it takes an action to eat one berry.
Okay, so automatically this sucks.
Yeah, now. you can't actually just like shove a whole handful of berries in your face. Like it's specifically it's a casting turns. Time. It's you, and they only last within 24 hours. So you have to eat them all within 24 hours. So you can't like stockpile them. And it takes an action to eat one berry, and it only restores 1 hit point.
I'd say this would be annoying if your characters always did this outside of combat, I guess. But like, realistically speaking, I think it's okay. Like, I would get annoyed but I've also had no one bring this to the table and be like, yeah, what do you mean? This is what I want to do. Because nobody takes good berry anymore.
No, nobody really does.
But like,
they do it for the memes more than anything.
Yeah. But like, for example, like the barbarian where you just wild shape.
Yeah.
And you're raging.
Yeah.
That, to me, that doesn't come to fruition right away. Like, for it to get real powerful.
No, it's not that. Like, again, maybe if you were like a bear totem barbarian and then the wild or the circle of the moon druid, and obviously you have resistance to all damage, and then you become a bear like that. But you're not doing as much damage. No, you would not be doing nearly as much damage as a bear than you would be either in your druid form or in your barbarian.
And you're cutting yourself apart in terms of what you're capable of, because druid and barbarian don't mix in any other aspect. No. You can't cast spells when you're raging.
Nope.
So, and most of the druid spells are concentration. So you can't concentrate on a spell while you're raging either. So like, while you are really good at taking hits,
so you just can't die. That's literally it.
You're also, by the way, very easy to hit. Like, you're just gonna get the shit kicked out of you. You have a ton of health, and you're gonna even technically more because your resistance to everything, but you're not gonna be doing as much damage. You can't cast spells. You only will have two you only have 2 uses of that for like ever. So you won't be able to get Archdruid, which gives you unlimited. So you'll only have 2 uses of that to do. Yeah. And like, to me, I get it. Like,
it can be fun.
It's fun. Like, honestly, if someone said,
like, I want to, you are a tank, you're a damage sponge.
If someone said, I want to be a bear totem barbarian, and I want to also be a druid. To me, flavor-wise, those 2 classes are actually closer than a lot of people, I would say, realize when they first look at them. Because to me, barbarian is a tribal nature.
Absolutely,
class.
Always is. Like, that is a
so like thing. To me, I would be completely okay. Like, I was my druid camp. Like, tribe, imagine I lived in a druidic society, but I was the fighter of the group.
Yeah.
So you could be both. That's okay.
Yeah.
I love this.
No, it's great in terms of flavor. I love it.
It's fantastic. Absolutely. But guess what? You're not going to be as effective in combat as much as you think.
This is not mechanically
you won't do a lot of damage. If your goal is to just take hits and never die, I get it.
Yeah, and again, maybe as a moon druid, you might deal okay because you'll get like magic for your.
I can tell you this right now: you will never do as much damage as a barbarian with a magical weapon.
No, you're right. They will not, or a druid that's just casting spells. Like,
I mean, yeah, like, and so for me, like, I'd be okay with this. This isn't even that overpowered.
No,
like, to me, it's not overpowered. It's just a theme. It's another way of looking at something of like, I want to do this one thing.
Oh, that, but if anything, it's just kind of more annoying because all it is you're just hard to kill. Like, that's all it is. Like, you aren't really powerful. You're just really hard to kill. And so all it is, you're just taking more time. Yeah. You're a literal damage, but you are the epitome of a tank. But it's
like, out of curiosity, what are you gonna do when I just kill all your damage dealers instead?
That's what I'm saying. Like, why would I waste time on you? When you're just a damage sponge, you're not necessarily dealing that much damage to me. You're not that huge of a threat. You're just an annoyance. I'm gonna kill the wizard or the druid or the other druid or the fighter or the rogue who's like dealing me all this damage. And I'm gonna kill them. They're far easier to kill. Plus, they're the only ones that are really damaging me. Like, you're just annoying. Like,
look, you are good at taking damage, and that. You know what? That is something. That is a viable the action economy, you will always be there in the corner because you're not dead yet.
Yeah.
But you don't have a lot of abilities to keep your other people from getting damaged. If
Not
you're
in that form.
No, and if you're in your rage, you can't heal anyone, which is something that I like about Druid, is that they are an off healer.
Yep.
And you also can't.
Druids are great. I love them.
You can't cast spells, so your environmental factors that Druids bring to the table, which is like large environmental factors, are not a factor anymore. So you are giving up a lot to not die.
You're giving up just about everything to basically be like immortal.
Yeah. Cool.
You're giving up basically everything else just to be immortal.
To me, I'd play this, and it
as long as you take damage too, because if you don't take damage or attack, you would lose your rage, and then you'd have to. I mean, could you technically still rage even in bear form? Like,
no, yeah, you can.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so
then, you can turn to a bear and then rage because you keep your mental stats.
Yeah, okay.
And rage is a mental stat. Rage is a mental thing. So if you want to play the game like that, that's okay.
That's fine. It's not really that. No, it has no real effect except just to you. It's more of a detriment, really.
And honestly, you might annoy some of the other characters at your table.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it would just be annoying to be like, you're not doing anything. You're not helping me.
Oh, you did. Oh, you hit me with a bear claw. That's 1d6 damage.
Yeah. Oh. Ooh, boy, you scratched me a little bit. Could you maybe?
Ooh, you did that. Ooh, you did that twice.
Oh, you bit me? Oh, wow.
You added +2 from your rage damage.
You bit me for a D8. Oh boy, that's
man. If anything, I'd have more fun if instead of doing that, you just went full grappler barbarian, and your whole thing was, I'm gonna jump on somebody, put them in a headlock, and just keep them there.
I'm just restraining them now. They can't move or do anything unless they get out.
I want to play basically a WWE wrestler.
A player on one game that I'm a part of right now made that. He made a plasmoid barbarian, a plasmoid beast barbarian who is just like a grapple specialist. Has done that.
Cool.
He wanted to do that, but the GM wouldn't He wanted to basically jump up in the air and power bomb a dude, but the GM wouldn't let him. And I was bro.
To me, that's kind of the beauty of D&D in a way. Is if someone like me or you can look at a list of classes and be like, I want to take 2 of these and make something stupid.
Yeah, I just want to.
I do that, and you know what? To me, if I mix 2 things together, I create some sort of justification that I can articulate. I have that character I told you about where I wanted to do Whisper Bard and one of the rogue classes,
assassin, I think.
Either assassin or even the swashbuckler, to make a midline fighter that when someone dies in combat, you harvest their soul, and now you have 3 different ways of changing how you look, and your whole thing is murder, infiltration, stealing, and just fucking with people.
Assassin gets the ability over 7 days make it completely so you could take their persona and then make that persona your act.
But the whole idea of the character is to just be secretly a complete douche, and steal from people and assume people's identity to get what they want, and there are very few games where you can actually bring that character to the table in the first place. No. But my theory crafting self, I sit in a corner and I'm like,
oh yeah, no, me too. I've made tons of characters just based off of inspiration I've had for narrative or story. That's usually what I make my characters off of. First is there's ooh, I would love to have this kind of story or this kind of experience. So I make a character like that. Sometimes I make them if I'm I like this class and I would like to play this, but that is much more rare and far and few between. And so I have just a huge backlog of characters where I'm just I love this personality and these abilities, and I would love to play this person in this specific campaign because I feel their abilities and personality would come out the most in this type of campaign.
Well, it's one of those things of I get why some people would be mad if you're well, I'm playing a paladin or a ranger, but I want to take a couple levels in fighter because I want action surge, and I want, because I like fighter, but I don't like some of the subclasses in fighter. I like just a couple abilities, and some tables, they're just going to tell you no.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with that. But at other tables that are maybe more, they want you to be powerful.
Like I said, I don't necessarily disagree with that because it's again, Ranger and Fighter are very similar. They're super similar in a lot of ways. And so it's hey, if you wanted a multi-class into Fighter, I don't see any flavor or roleplay reason why you couldn't maybe like specifically just focus on being better at fighting. But then you also have like, you know, the Rangers, more of some of the Rangers skills as well as their quartercaster abilities. You know, it's like, that's okay, fair enough, sure, why not? You know, like,
well, it's also, and this is gonna be something
it might be slightly less like we're just like, yeah, I just want to do this because I like this, I want these abilities. I'm like, okay, well, you know, okay.
well,
Like
there's
it's
also, I think, something that people also forget. A lot of these combining of classes and doing all this stuff does not come to fruition until late game, like when you're higher level,
most of it, yes,
where
because you are,
where
yeah.
where at that point everyone should be really powerful. And so
Yep.
if your weird gimmick thing is to be really powerful at a certain point, no one's going to feel weird about it. You know, like I still want
They
to do
probably
the
shouldn't. Like,
I still want to do the Valor Bard where you take magical secrets at 10 to get Swift Quiver.
yeah,
So you can just attack a bunch of times.
yeah,
And then you add things like Fighter or Rogue or Ranger to get like extra damage on stuff.
yeah,
But to me, that's just, I don't have a crazy magic weapon. Because
yeah,
if I had a crazy magic weapon, I'd be doing that anyway. Because
yeah.
if you just took a rogue or a ranger and gave him a crazy magic weapon,
They'd be
they would
dealing
put out the
buco
same damage output.
Yeah,
But my character takes until like
it's just flavor. Yeah,
my character takes until like level 10 or 12 to even
to
get to
even
that
be
point.
viable in that sense. Yeah,
So the whole time before that, I'm just a shitty ranger.
yeah,
I should be able to be a shitty ranger for 10 levels and
yeah,
then be better. Like,
yeah,
like, because that's, but especially if you play the character that way, if you use some of your bard skills to then be better at like those other class skills, like if this
yeah,
bard is good at sneak, why at level 10 can't I also be a rogue?
yeah.
Like, so I
Sure.
think there's plus and minuses, and like a lot of stuff. A 2 level dip into fighter is not the end of the world.
I mean, again, like I said, I feel like for fighter, ironically, like if you are a character that is very battle centric, I don't see any reason why you couldn't necessarily dip into, like, again, if we're talking about like cleric or paladin, right? You need to have at least some kind of like religious or divine connection or reason or compulsion or whatever to justify why you're getting now this super powered, you know, divine bolster. Like you can't just say like, I'm gonna do this in paladin or cleric because I want to. It's like that. I would be like, I'm like, I don't know
Well,
about
now you have
that.
an oath you have to live to.
Yeah, or you've never really lived by much of a code at all. That seems completely contrary to the point of paladin in the first place. Now, I'm not saying you have to be like super uber like pious or religious to become a cleric or a paladin. Far from it. But you do have to have a very, you know, pretty powerful code to even begin to kind of go in. That's the point of it, where it's just like you have, this is what you really believe in, like for real. That is why you get these powers. Your powers manifest from your strength of belief and faith and will in this, maybe not even God, but what they stand for, like what they represent. And if you don't really have that in your character, I can't really see a way I could justify allowing you to multi-class into these types of things. Same thing with like Druid, you know, it's like if you don't really care much about the environment, I don't see how you could tap into the literal energy and essence and magic of the environment, of nature itself to utilize. Like,
Yeah, like that's
like
something you have to.
it's like, again, that's why I could see like if you wanted to go either warlock, if you found like a particularly powerful patron that you wanted to like gain power from, or sorcerer. It's like, okay, sorcerer abilities, they specifically state you can just maybe have something in your bloodline or background, or maybe your exposure to certain magic on your journey has unlocked this latent potential in you. Fair enough. You could probably take sorcerer, like a multi-class in sorcerer, probably any level or any place, and it would, you know, you could reasonably justify it. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. Same thing with fighter. With rogue, once again, I don't know. I would be like, you have rogues literally in their class description are like, you have trained for a long time to be skillful and very and have your finesse and all this. Like they are like, hey, they have trained to like exorbitant extents and have experienced a ton to be as good as they are at what they do. So
Yeah.
unless you have a background reason, or like you yourself have been training in these ways to be good, I don't know if I could say you could be a rogue. Like that seems kind of like, yeah. Same thing with bard. It's like you haven't really trained in music, or
No.
you're not very charismatic necessarily. Like if you're not more like open or like artistic in any way, it's like I don't see how I could.
I
So
think,
yeah,
it's one of those things, like I'm in a position right now where I'm playing in a game where we're high level. So this is my opportunity to, if characters, because we switch characters in and out.
yeah.
If a character dies, you come back as a character at that level. If your character doesn't want to be at the table anymore, like if that character
Exchange
isn't
characters,
relevant,
yeah.
isn't relevant in the story, you can bring in another character, which gives all of us an opportunity to try out builds and things
Different
that
kinds of things. It's
we were
great. It's
interested
nice.
in
Yeah, it's
without having
nice.
to wait 10 levels before it gets off the
You've
ground.
died or whatever. Yeah.
And so it's a different play style. And if you're at a table that's not like that, talk to your DM and be like, hey, this is something I want to do. I know it's going to take this many levels. I don't think it's overpowered. What do you think? And get their vibe from it, because
You should always consult with your GM
like,
about any multi-class or whatever.
even I do that building these characters. Like, before I even bring a character to the table, I talk to my DM and I'm like, hey, this is what I pieced together.
There's an idea, concept.
How do you feel about it?
Yeah.
Does this make sense? Here's their backstory to an extent. Like, this is why this is like this. Can I make that justification? Do you think that makes sense? I've tried to do some stuff where he's like, I don't think that's a good fit. And I'm like, okay. Like, yeah, I'm a little like,
again, and like to
you have to
kind of,
again, you have to be an adult about it. And
to kind of tie back into like the whole concept of, again, power gaming. I think what we've kind of highlighted at this point is I feel that there's a distinct difference between people who, again, take pieces and aspects of a character or of classes and races just specifically to be like powerful, to then maybe even abuse those mechanics and stuff, to basically be like, oh, well, I'm resistant and immune to everything because I'm a Githyanki, totem barbarian, so I literally have resistance to everything. And it's like, okay, well, what's that Githyanki, background? Why are they a barbarian? Why are they a totem barbarian at that? Like, would Githyanki really have much, animal connection in that way based off of where they're from? Were they raised in like a material plane, barbarian tribe? Like, how do you justify having that, as opposed to it just being, again, you chose this whole thing purely from a straight mechanical place just because, like, yeah, you wanted to be immortal, or you wanted to like not take damage because I know, there are plenty of stories where players are just like so frightened that their character takes damage and that their character might die, and they can't handle that, and so they don't want to take damage, and they just want to steamroll through everything. And it's like, look, being powerful is great. It's fun. Absolutely. I love being powerful in a game. But my characters are usually powerful specifically because of a reason on why they are that. Like, for instance, I told Sam, I think I also you guys a little bit about it as well, is like, I have a forest gnome monk, Way of the Open Hand character that I love. And now, just statistically and mechanically, he is never, ever going to be the strongest, the most like long living, the quickest, or the most skillful at anything. Like, as a monk, especially with that subclass, it's like he is good at fighting primarily, but even then, he doesn't have like a lot of health. He doesn't have like a ton of defense unless I get like his stats up pretty high. He also won't really have access to a lot of the best weapons or items necessarily that a lot of other classes can benefit from, because monks are just so very specific in what they do and what they can benefit from. So he'll never be the best, like, really at anything. But I love him and I play him because I love the flavor of both his character as well as his class, how they blend. Like I said, I told Sam, like, one of my biggest dreams in a D&D campaign is being able to use this character to, like, a quivering palm kill like an ancient red dragon. Like, it would just be so cool. And for that reason, and that reason alone, is like why I'm like, I love this class, I love this character, even though he's, mechanically speaking, not ever going to be the best or most powerful really at anything. Like, he's never going to be like really powerful. Because
you could take a different race. You could take, something that, like, you could make it more powerful.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you wanted to take, for instance, like, shoot, I don't know, what has like you could maybe make a case for like doing unarmed strikes with like natural weapons, like a tabaxi, for instance. You take a tabaxi as a rogue, their movement is like, even again with a gnome for movement, it'll always be less because they start with 25, unless I do something that bumps it up. With a tabaxi, you can potentially already double your movement. You could run like 120 feet. You have like your natural weapon with your claws that you could technically put in as like I don't see any reason how you couldn't make an argument to be like, I'm going to unarmed strike, but I'm going to use my claws, so I get my martial arts die, but I can make it slashing damage instead of bludgeoning, or I can do extra whatever. Like,
it also starts out more powerful.
Yeah.
Like there's ways to game the system, and like as an experienced player, you'll know those ways, and not making the best choice at every turn, I think, to me, is what changes, you know, whether you're a power gamer or like whether you're a legit, like you're a shitty player. Because like people who do
I
this
feel like
to
it's
get
just
every advantage, to get every
that's
little
what I'm
bit.
saying. It's like, even if you're powerful, it doesn't mean that you're good at everything. You're not like a super, like, again, as a wizard, you're gonna suck at strength most likely. Like, you're not gonna be able to do a lot of strength things unless you have certain magic that helps with that. But that still requires spell slots and expenditure of resources. Like, again, I feel like the difference is, even if you like, I feel like the difference is if you take so-called every like best possible decision and choice, but again, you take it not as a means of like sense, flavor, and reason that's applicable to your character, but just, again, if it's completely out of the realm of anything that you're doing in your character, you're just like, again, mechanically, if it's all just mechanics and all you do is cheese, all you do is use the same exact like thing again and again, basically to just guarantee success or guarantee that you won't die or whatever, it's like that becomes kind of like, it sours the game, in my opinion. It's sour, like it's just like a sour. It's like, again, like we said, with video games, right? You press like any build that's basically just like, oh, I press square to win, and it just guarantees my victory due to, like, again, mechanical reasons that, like, in real life, like, it's like you couldn't actually do that in real life. There's all kinds of things that could happen, but because of the mechanics and the restrictions of how the game is built, you just get this thing now that's just kind of crappy. Like, we can say, like, for instance, Elden Ring or any of the Dark Souls series, right? There are just blatantly better abilities and weapons and maybe even classes in the game that do things better than others, right? They just do. And it's like, that's fine. They're not. And obviously, once you get to a certain level, you can potentially just do everything, right? You are that character that can just do everything well. You don't have any weaknesses, because you literally just, you farmed and you grinded the game until you are literally like God level, where you can do everything you want to do. And so, like, if you're like PvPing, it's like you just have a broken build where you can just do all of this stuff now. And it's like you don't even have like a flavor or specific type of build that you're like playing and trying to make viable. It's like you're just doing the thing that always wins. And you're not, but then not even through your skill. You're not doing it through your skill or strategy. It's brainless. And maybe that's where it comes in, is if it's like literally a thing where you can just win by being brainless and you have no real need to be involved or to be engaged or care, why are you playing?
Yeah, that's the thing that
if there's no risk, why are you playing? Why are you rolling dice? That's literally a huge part of this game. If you don't want to roll dice, just play that game. Just play Dark Souls, Elden Ring, whatever else, and you will have the ability to just succeed always. Why are you playing D&D?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think
it's
I'd say that in essence is probably the point of balance. At least those are our hot, spicy takes on it in terms of balance. Balancing is all about making the game fun while still giving you the reason to play, maybe. You know what I mean? If you're not going to try and balance the game, and obviously plenty of people have different ideas, preferences, and beliefs on what balanced means and what balanced is, right? We've given you a ton of our personal thoughts, on abilities, items, features, even the concept of what is balanced and imbalanced and such, and the reasons for those. We hope that you guys have, if nothing else, taken maybe a little bit away from our rambling and interactions here. As always, that's, I mean, if you're here at this point like that, if we haven't been entirely forthcoming and honest about what this channel is. Like we've, from jump, that's basically what this is. We still appreciate you guys coming along for us and listening to us. And, if you guys honestly would be very interested to hear your all thoughts and everything. So please leave comments, down in the comment section about your thoughts on what is OP, what's maybe broken, what's imbalanced or balanced.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some of that stuff, because I think we both have very specific backgrounds in what we've played and how people we've interacted with. And so I want to hear, because my only window into how other people feel about certain things is usually just you.
Yeah.
I don't like to troll subreddits. I don't like to. I don't care.
Like I go over all that stuff. I listen to stories, like horror stories. I like,
I don't
a
have
lot of the other
patience for
players
it.
the games that I've played with or run, so
For me, the cringe stuff I can't handle. So I like to hear people who genuinely have like counterpoints or like questions or things where it's like, well, this is what I experienced. Like, how do you say I fix that, or what do you want me?
How do you address
think
it? How do you handle it? How do you
'Cause-
feel if you've been in those situations?
Yeah,
Like,
because I think that's where I look at it from. So I'd love to hear some stuff about that, because I'd like to address it and kind of maybe give my 2 cents, and if that can help somebody, that would be cool.
yeah, absolutely. Honestly, just having some comparisons, it's great. It's one of the best things about this community. So, once again, as always, thank you guys all for coming along with us on this fantastic ride. Have a great rest of your day. Again, please leave comments, like, share, whatever. We always appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, y'all.
Have a good
Peace.
one. Peace.